Hello everyone. I am your dark narrator here to guide you today. I know many of you use this video to help you drift off to sleep, but before you do, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also drop a comment letting us know where you're from and what time you're watching. Now settle in, get comfortable, and relax. Hello everyone. I am your dark narrator here to guide you today. I know many of you use this video to help you drift off to sleep, but before you do, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also drop a comment letting us know where you're from and what time you're watching. Now settle in, get comfortable, and relax. You know the kind of town where everyone knows everyone? Where the local diner serves coffee in mugs stamped with your name, and everyone will lend a hand to a neighbor in need? A place where generations of families grew up together? Well, that is the sort of place where I live. Sure, it is a bit rustic, hell, I barely have reliable internet. But it is nice enough for us. It's the kind of place where time feels like it's standing still, except for one thing: the nights. The nights here are a little different. I've lived here all my life, and there's no place I'd rather be. Or at least that's what I used to think. This place has its quirks like any small town, but there's a big one that stands out for us. You see, every night without fail at 11:38 p.m. the town locks down. I'm not talking about just closing up shops and less people being out and about. I'm talking about a real lockdown. Doors slam shut and are barred, windows rattle and lock, and everyone knows they have to be inside and stay inside. At least for what happens next. The next part is strange. No one ever sees anything moving out there directly, but we all just know. We just know that somehow something outside is trying to get in. An eerie silence falls over the streets. It's like the whole town is holding its breath. Then in 12 minutes exactly, it is just over. I've always wondered why it happens at exactly 11:38 p.m. People here don't talk about it much, but when they do, they whisper. They say it's just the way things are, that it's been happening for as long as anyone can remember. But I know better, I've seen it, whatever it is. The first time I noticed it, I was still pretty young. I think I was 10 or 11. I'd stayed up late reading some of my favorite comic books. My parents warned me, like many other kids in town, that we had to go to bed early. But if we did get up, then absolutely no leaving the house or leaving any windows or doors open. I was not asleep, but was still following the rules, when I heard the strangest sound. It was a low, guttural hum that seemed to vibrate through the walls. I looked out the window, and that's when I saw it. The streets were empty, but there was a presence. It's hard to describe. It wasn't a person or an animal, it was something else. Something that didn't feel like it belonged. It moved with this strange, jerky motion like it wasn't entirely in control of its own body. It radiated a disturbing sense of distortion that made my head hurt, and my eyes had a difficult time focusing on it. I could feel this overwhelming sense of hunger that made my skin crawl. Before I knew it, it was over. It had passed my house, and I realized I had been staring out my window in a hypnotic daze. It was almost midnight, and I went to sleep and did not tell my parents about the disturbing thing I had seen. I didn't see it again for years, but the feeling never left. Every night at 11:38 on the dot, when the town shuts down, I know it is there. We all try to act like it's not. Just behave like we have a strict curfew and that nothing is really out there. Yet the people who are too bold or foolish and think that it's nothing, well, they don't last long. Those of us who are still here know that whatever that thing is, it's out there. Stalking, hunting, looking for anything, an open window, a cracked door. Disappearances are frequent, especially for such a small town. The police have a whole song and dance for anyone who goes missing from the outside. But when it is a resident, well, it is more of a case where the families of the victims are reprimanded for not having known better. No one knows why the window of time is so mercifully brief. Almost just as suddenly as it starts, it's over. By 11:50 p.m., the streets are quiet again and the town feels normal. But it's not normal. It never was. People here have learned to live with it. They lock their doors, shut their windows, and pretend it's not happening. I asked my parents why we don't just move, and they never gave me a good answer. All they said was, "It wouldn't do any good. We have to endure. It has to be here. It is safer for everyone if it's here." It did not make sense. I know people can get attached to places, but it felt crazy to me. I couldn't just pretend this was normal, not after what I saw. Not after what I felt. There was something out there, and it was worse than anyone would believe. It was just recently that I saw it again. It was a normal night, at least as normal as nights could be in my town. I was getting ready to go to bed when I noticed that my cat Quincy was missing. I looked everywhere, but I couldn't find him. Then I heard something and looked through the window to spot a familiar shape, and my heart sank. He was outside. He must have gotten out when I had come home earlier and was sauntering along the sidewalk, clueless to the impending danger. The time was 11:36 p.m. I had no idea if the creature did anything to animals, but I did not want to find out. I had never let Quincy outside before, and he did not come back to my shouted calls for his return. I had to do something dangerous and stupid to save him. I rushed outside, sprinting toward him and trying to grab him and bring him in before it was too late. I managed to reach him and pick him up. But then I froze when I sensed a presence as I was scrambling back to my door. Quincy's ears folded back and he hissed. I felt paralyzed, and then I thought I saw it again. It was different this time, larger and more overwhelming than before. Its presence seemed to fill the entire street, pressing against the houses like an unseen force. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I was frozen in place, my breath caught in my throat. To my horror, it seemed to finally regard me. Quincy jumped out of my hands and ran back to my house. He had fortunately evaded whatever interest the thing might have had with him. The creature's head twisted unnaturally in my direction, its distorted features coalescing into more recognizable shapes. Staring into the grotesque visage forced a scream out of me as I beheld the blasphemous impossibility. I turned and sprinted away, screaming like a maniac, my heart hammering against my ribcage with such force that each beat felt like it might crack my chest open. The sound of its pursuit echoed behind me, a wet slapping noise like a monstrous jellyfish gliding across the ground. Its deafening roar filled the air, shaking the ground beneath my feet as I ran for my life. I did not know if I could get away. No one I knew had been outside and survived. I ducked into an alley, my hands shaking as I pressed myself against the wall. My breath came in short, sharp gasps, and I could feel sweat dripping down my face. I didn't dare look around the corner. I didn't dare move. And then I heard the harrowing screams. They sliced through the air, piercing and full of terror. My heart raced as I strained to see who was making them, but all I could make out were shadowy figures caught in the open. The screams were short, sharp, and then they were swallowed by the night. The deafening silence that followed only added to the fear weighing down on me. I stayed pressed against the wall, trying to make myself as small and invisible as possible. The darkness seemed to come alive with every creak and rustle, amplifying my fear. I held my breath until I heard the sound of the creature moving away. And then, just like that, it was gone. But the eerie stillness lingered, haunting me even after the clock struck 11:50 p.m. The streets were once again quiet, but my nerves were still on edge. I stumbled back to my house, every step feeling like a race against time. Quincy waited anxiously at the door and bolted inside with me, seeking shelter inside. The horrible night had left me shaken, but grateful to be alive. Whatever that thing is, it does not belong in this world. It is not of this time or place, and its presence is so unsettling it makes your mind ache just to catch a glimpse of it. No one can tell of its origins. Maybe they are lost in the depths of history. But whatever its history, it remains. Always there, lurking in the shadows every night without fail. At that point, I did the one thing you probably think everyone should have done by now. I left my hometown. I moved to the largest city I could reach to get away from it all. My parents did not approve. In fact, they tried to tell me I could not go. I was so desperate to get out of there that I had to sneak away in the early morning when they could not interfere. I never understood why we all stayed there and tried to ignore the eldritch nightmare that hunted us at night. It seemed so simple, and I felt better at first. The city felt alive with the hum of traffic and the distant chatter of people during the day, a cacophony that made me feel safe, anonymous. Indeed, I thought I'd left the nightmare behind, that the creature was just a memory, a relic of a past I could bury. My new apartment is a cozy studio on the 5th floor, with a view of the bustling streets below, high enough where looking out the window does not fill me with dread at night. Unfortunately, something happened last night that has shattered the fragile illusion of my peaceful transition. On the first night in my new place, I sat on the edge of my bed, flipping through a magazine to distract myself from the creeping unease that had settled in the pit of my stomach. The clock on the nightstand read 11:28 p.m. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the creature was gone, that I was safe now. But the weight of the past lingered, a shadow in the corner of my mind that I couldn't shake. By 11:38 p.m., the city outside my window was eerily quiet. The usual sounds of traffic and distant music had faded, replaced by an unsettling stillness. I tried to focus on the magazine, but my eyes kept drifting toward the window, the darkness beyond the glass pressing in on me. And then I heard it, a soft, tentative tap against the pane. My heart skipped a beat. I froze, the magazine slipping from my fingers and falling to the floor. The sound was light, almost imperceptible, but it sent a chill coursing through my veins. I told myself it was nothing, I was just being paranoid. But then it came again, another tap, this time more insistent. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. My eyes were fixed on the window, the darkness beyond it seeming to pulse with a life of its own. The tapping stopped, and for a moment there was nothing but silence. Then a faint scratching sound, like claws on glass. My heart sank. I knew that sound. I knew what it meant. Slowly, with my legs trembling beneath me, I rose from the bed and approached the window. My hand reached for the curtain, hesitated, and then, with a deep, shaky breath, I pulled it back. What I saw made me freeze in terror. The creature was perched on the fire escape outside my window, its twisted form silhouetted against the moonlit sky. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and its presence seemed to fill the room, pressing in on me with an unspeakable horror. I tried to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. The creature's head tilted to the side, its gaze locked on mine, and I felt a wave of dread wash over me. It was here. It had followed me. And then, as if in slow motion, its mouth opened, revealing rows of jagged teeth, and it let out a low, guttural growl. The sound shattered the paralysis that held me in place. I stumbled back, my voice finally breaking free in a raw, terrified scream. The creature's form seemed to blur and shift, its presence filling the room with an unspeakable darkness. And then everything went black. I regained consciousness, and I know it is not over. There is no escape from this thing that has followed me. I consider what my parents had said when I asked them why we never moved. Then, with dawning horror, I realized the truth of their words. It is safer for everyone if it's here. They did not mean it was safer for us, they meant it was safer for everyone else. They knew the danger. They stayed to keep it there. Now in my ignorance, I've made a huge mistake. Somehow it knew I left. It has followed me here to a place where over 1 million people will soon know about its existence, and maybe more if it moves beyond that. I'm so sorry for bringing it here, I didn't know. Please, for your own safety, stay inside between 11:38 p.m. and 11:50 p.m. By now, it might not be safe wherever you are as well. I should have known something was wrong the moment I saw the ad. Night clerk wanted, no experience necessary, high pay, cash only. That last part stood out. Nobody pays in cash anymore, and definitely not at the rate they were offering, 3 times what a normal graveyard shift job would pay. But I was desperate. Rent was overdue, my car was on the verge of breaking down, and my fridge was as empty as my bank account. The motel sat on the outskirts of town, a crumbling relic from the 70s, barely visible from the highway. The neon sign flickered erratically, buzzing like a dying insect. Moonlight Motel, it read, though half the letters were burnt out. Moonlight Motel. It looked abandoned, but as I pulled into the cracked parking lot, I saw a single light glowing from the office window. Inside, the air was thick with the stench of mildew and something else, something metallic, like rust or blood. Behind the desk sat a man who looked like he hadn't slept in years. His skin was pale, almost translucent under the flickering fluorescent lights, and his eyes were sunken, shadowed by deep circles. "You here for the job?" His voice was flat, emotionless. I hesitated before nodding. He pushed a set of keys across the desk. "You start tonight." "No interview?" I asked. "Not necessary." I should have walked out right then, but the weight of my empty wallet kept me rooted to the spot. I swallowed my unease. "Any rules?" The man's gaze darkened. His lips barely moved as he spoke. "Never question the guests." A chill crawled up my spine. I wanted to ask what he meant, but something in his expression told me I wouldn't like the answer. Instead, I nodded, took the keys, and stepped behind the counter. The man stood up and grabbed his coat. I'll be back at dawn. Don't leave the office. Don't talk too much. And whatever you see on the cameras, ignore it. Before I could respond, he was gone, leaving me alone in the dim, humming silence of the Moonlight Motel. And that was the beginning of the longest night of my life. At first, the shift was quiet. Too quiet. The only sound was the steady ticking of the old wall clock and the occasional gust of wind rattling the windows. I busied myself organizing the scattered papers on the desk, trying to ignore the peeling wallpaper and the faint smell of something rotten wafting from the vents. The guest log sat open in front of me. I flipped through the pages. Something was off. The names were strange. Some were illegible, written in symbols I didn't recognize. Others were just initials or single words like Mr. White or Mother. And then there were the dates. The most recent check-in was 3 days ago. No checkouts. Before that, a week, 2 weeks, a month. Pages and pages of guests arriving but never leaving. A shiver crept up my spine. The bell above the office door jingled, and I nearly jumped out of my chair. A man stood in the doorway, at least I thought it was a man. His face was wrong. Something about the way the shadows fell across it made it seem like his features were shifting, like his mouth and nose weren't quite where they should be. His suit was too clean, too crisp, like it had just been ironed moments before. He didn't blink. "I need a room," he said. His voice didn't match his lips. There was a lag, like a badly dubbed movie. I forced a smile, pretending not to notice. "Sure, how many nights?" He tilted his head slightly. "Just the one." A lie. I knew that now. I handed him a key, trying not to let my fingers touch his as he took it. His skin was ice cold. Without another word, he turned and walked toward the hallway. His footsteps were off, too slow, too deliberate, like he was mimicking how a person should walk, but not quite getting it right. I watched him disappear into the shadows of the motel's dimly lit corridor. I should have ignored the cameras like the manager said, but I didn't. I turned to the monitor, watching the grainy black and white feed of the hallway outside room 6, where the man had just gone. He stood in front of the door, motionless. Seconds passed, then minutes. He didn't move. Then all at once the screen flickered with static, and when the image returned, the man was staring directly into the camera. His face was too close, stretched unnaturally across the screen as if he knew I was watching. And then, he smiled. Not a normal smile, not a human smile. It was too wide, stretching from ear to ear, his teeth long and needle-like, gleaming in the flickering light. I slammed the monitor off. I didn't sleep at all that night, and when dawn came, the man was gone. But the key to room 6 was still on the desk, untouched. The second night felt heavier. I hadn't slept after what I saw on the cameras. Even in daylight, the motel felt wrong. The air was stale, too still, like it hadn't been disturbed in years. When I arrived for my shift, the manager barely acknowledged me. He sat in the office for a few minutes, staring at the wall before muttering, "You stayed. Good." Then he left, leaving me alone with whatever the hell was lurking in this place. The night started slow. I spent the first few hours flipping through the old guest logs, trying to make sense of the bizarre entries. I found names that had been repeated over and over across different years, decades even. Mr. White, Mother, H. Carter, H. Carter, H. Carter, the same names, the same rooms, but always new dates. The wind howled outside. The walls groaned like they were breathing. Then, around 2 a.m., the noise started. A faint scratching, coming from inside the vents. At first, I tried to ignore it. Rats, I told myself. Or maybe just the old pipes settling. But the sound grew louder, more deliberate. It wasn't just random scurrying. It was pacing. A slow, dragging movement like something was crawling just beneath the surface. I turned up the tiny radio on the desk, trying to drown it out. That's when the phone rang. The motel phone, the one that had been silent all night. I picked it up, hesitant. Front desk. Static, then a voice, faint, whispering. "Help me." My breath caught in my throat. "Who is this?" Silence, and then thump. The sound came from inside the vent, just above my head. I stumbled back, heart hammering. Dust trickled from the metal grates. Whatever was inside was right there, pressing against the thin barrier. The metal creaked, bending outward slightly, as if something was pushing from the other side. I grabbed the flashlight from the desk and aimed it at the vent. Who's in there? No answer. Just breathing. Shallow, ragged breathing. Then slowly something moved. A shadow shifted behind the grate. A long, pale hand with fingers too many and too thin slipped through one of the gaps. It twitched, stretching unnaturally, grasping at the air. I staggered back. What the hell, bang! The vent dented outward as if whatever was inside had thrown itself against it. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I grabbed the office door handle, ready to run. But then, just as suddenly as it started, the noise stopped. I stood there, frozen, barely breathing. Minutes passed. The air was thick, oppressive, the vent remained still, and then the phone rang again. I picked it up with a shaking hand, static. And then the voice, closer this time. "Don't look at them." Click. The line went dead. I nearly quit that night. But when dawn came, the manager returned as if nothing had happened. He didn't ask why my hands were shaking. Didn't ask why the vent was dented or why I had unplugged the security cameras. He just dropped an envelope of cash on the desk and said, "See you tonight." And like an idiot, I showed up again. The third night felt worse. The motel seemed darker, the air heavier. The lights flickered more than usual. The neon sign outside buzzed like a dying fly, barely illuminating the lot. And the guests? They were watching me. They didn't talk, not really. They'd come in, ask for a room in voices that barely sounded human, and disappear into the hall. I avoided eye contact, keeping my head down, pretending not to notice the way their faces shifted when they moved. Then around midnight, she arrived. A woman. She was different from the others. She looked normal. Her face didn't change when I blinked. Her movements were smooth, natural. She had deep sunken eyes, and her dark hair hung in wet strands over her face like she had just stepped out of a storm. She leaned in close when she spoke. "Please, I need a room." Her voice was hoarse, desperate. I hesitated. "How many nights?" Her hand clamped over mine, ice cold. "Just one." The same lie they all told. I gave her the key to room 9. She didn't thank me, didn't even look at it. She just snatched it from my hand and hurried down the hallway, glancing over her shoulder as if something were following her. I watched her on the cameras. Unlike the others, she didn't just stand in front of her door. She locked it, bolted it, pushed the dresser in front of it. Then she sat on the bed, knees pulled to her chest, eyes glued to the door. I don't know why, but I felt compelled to check on her. Maybe because she seemed scared. Maybe because she seemed real. I grabbed the master key and made my way down the hall. The motel felt suffocating, like the walls were pressing in. Every door I passed felt wrong, like something was breathing on the other side. When I reached room 9, I knocked softly. "Ma'am, everything okay?" Silence. Then a whisper. "They know I'm here." My stomach twisted. "Who?" She didn't answer. But suddenly her eyes snapped to something behind me. I turned, and for the first time I saw one of them. One of the guests, standing at the end of the hall. Too tall, too thin, a silhouette darker than the shadows around it. Its head was tilted too far, its face blank, no eyes, no mouth, just smooth, featureless skin stretched over bone. It twitched, taking a jerky step forward. The lights flickered. And then another one appeared, and another, stepping out of the rooms, emerging from the darkness, surrounding me. The woman in room 9 grabbed my wrist, yanking me inside just as the lights went out. I didn't fight her, I didn't question it, because for the first time since I started this job, I knew one thing for certain. I was never supposed to leave this motel. The woman's grip was like ice, her nails digging into my skin as she slammed the door shut. "Turn off the light," she hissed. I barely had time to react before she reached past me and twisted the lamp's switch. The room plunged into darkness. My pulse pounded in my ears as we stood there, barely breathing. Then the footsteps started, slow, uneven, right outside the door. I wanted to move, to hide, to do something, but the woman squeezed my wrist tighter, her silent warning clear. "Don't." The floorboards creaked. Something was standing outside. The doorknob twitched. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay still. The darkness pressed against me, heavy and suffocating. I could hear it breathing. Or maybe that was the woman. Or maybe it was something else. Then something slid under the door. A shadow. Long, stretching across the carpet like fingers curling toward my feet. I felt a cold, unnatural pull, like it was trying to drag me closer. My breath hitched as I took a tiny step back, but the second I moved, the shadow snapped toward me. The woman clamped a hand over my mouth before I could scream. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Don't move, don't speak. It can't see you unless you let it." The shadow twitched, hesitated, and then it retracted. The footsteps retreated, slow and deliberate. The door creaked as something leaned against it, its weight pressing against the wood. I could feel it there, waiting. Minutes passed. Maybe hours. Then, nothing. It was gone. The woman finally let go of me, and I sucked in a ragged breath. "What the hell was that?" I whispered. She didn't answer at first. She just walked to the window and peeled back the curtain an inch, peering outside. Then she whispered two words that made my stomach drop. "You saw them." I didn't respond. I didn't know how to respond. She turned to face me, her sunken eyes full of something like pity. "You shouldn't have come to this place." "I didn't have a choice," I muttered. Her expression darkened. None of us did. Something about the way she said that made my skin crawl. I took a shaky breath. "What are they?" The woman hesitated. "They don't have a name. Not one we can say." I shook my head. "That doesn't make any sense." She ignored me, stepping closer. "How long have you been working here?" "3 nights," I said, her face twisted with something like grief. "That's too long." My stomach clenched. "What do you mean?" She gestured toward the door. "Did you notice? The ones who check in?" I nodded slowly. "They don't leave. Neither do the employees." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I shook my head. "Number the manager. He leaves every morning." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Does he?" The room felt colder. A horrible thought crept into my mind. The manager was always gone when I arrived, always back before dawn. I thought about the security cameras, the flickering static, the way some guests just stood in front of their doors, unmoving, staring at nothing, the way the motel seemed bigger at night, the hallways stretching longer than they should. "What is this place?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out something small, pressing it into my hand. A room key. But not just any key. It was old, rusted, the number worn away. The metal was ice cold, like it had been sitting in a freezer. "What is this?" I asked. Her voice was hollow. "The key to the real exit." My blood ran cold. "There's no front door," she whispered. "Not really. That thing you walk through every night, it just brings you back in." I wanted to deny it, to argue, but deep down I felt the truth in her words. I gripped the key tighter. And then, the hallway light flickered. The air shifted. The woman went pale. "They know," she whispered. "They know I told you." A deep, rattling click echoed from the hallway, like every door was unlocking. And then, the motel came alive. The walls groaned, the ceiling trembled. Shadows leaked from under the door. The air was thick with the sound of something moving, countless bodies shifting, twitching, crawling. The woman grabbed my arm. "Run." The door burst open, and I saw all of them. Not just the guests, not just the manager, something else. Something that had been waiting for me since the moment I arrived. And then, the lights went out. The lights died. Total darkness swallowed the room, thick and suffocating, pressing against my skin like damp earth. I couldn't see my own hands, couldn't tell if my eyes were open or shut, but I felt them, the guests, standing in the doorway, waiting. A sound crawled through the dark. Bones popping, joints twisting, something wet and wrong shifting closer. Then, a whisper right next to my ear. "Where do you think you're going?" Cold breath slid across my neck. I bolted. The woman grabbed my wrist, yanking me forward as we ran. I couldn't see, but she seemed to know where to go. My feet pounded against the carpet, the motel warping around us, hallways stretching, doors multiplying, the air thick with the scent of rot and something metallic like blood. The sounds behind us grew louder, faster. The guests were following, moving with that horrible, jerky twitching like broken marionettes, their 2 long limbs scraping against the walls. "Where are we going?" I gasped. "The stairs," she whispered. We turned a corner and suddenly, there they were, the stairs to the 2nd floor, except there was no 2nd floor. I stopped short. What the hell? I had seen this motel from the outside. It was 1 story. No stairs, no upper level. But here they were, a long, spiraling staircase disappearing into the dark above us. "Come on!" she hissed, pulling me up the steps. I didn't fight her. As we climbed, the motel shifted around us. The walls grew taller, the air colder. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting shadows that moved on their own. A voice slithered through the dark. "You don't belong here." It was everywhere, behind us, above us, inside my own head. Then, a hand shot out from between the steps, thin, gray. Fingers too long, clawing at my ankle. I kicked, hard. The thing screeched, a high warbling sound like a skipping record. The woman yanked me up the last few steps, and suddenly, we weren't in the motel anymore, we were somewhere else. The air changed the second we stepped off the stairs. It was wrong, heavy. We stood in a narrow hallway lined with doors, hundreds of them. More than the motel could possibly hold. They stretched endlessly in both directions, each door identical, wooden, numbered in brass. "This isn't real," I whispered. The woman ignored me, marching forward with quick, purposeful steps. "Stay close, don't touch the doors." I followed, my heart hammering. The hallway was dead silent except for our footsteps, but I could feel something behind the doors, watching, listening. Then, as we passed room 209, knuckles rapped against the wood, I froze. The woman grabbed my arm, yanking me forward. "Don't stop." Another door knocked, then another. The sound spread like a wave, growing faster, more frantic, dozens. No, hundreds of fists hammering against the wood. Bang, 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 bang. The hallway shook, the doors rattled in their frames, and then one swung open. A long, pale arm shot out, fingers grasping, nails splintering as they dug into the floor. The rest of it followed, a thing crawling out on too many limbs, its head lolling, mouth yawning open in a soundless scream. We ran. The hallway stretched, growing longer, the doors warping and pulsing like breathing flesh. The lights flickered wildly, casting grotesque, shifting shadows that didn't match our movements. Something was chasing us. I didn't dare look back. Then, the woman stopped. I skidded to a halt beside her. "What the hell are you doing? Keep moving." She didn't respond. She was staring at a door, different from the others. Black, no number, no handle. "The exit," she breathed. I didn't ask questions. I reached for the key she had given me earlier, shoved it into the lock, and twisted. The door screamed. Not a creak, not a groan. A full, shrieking wail, as if the wood itself was alive. The air turned ice cold. The motel shuddered, the hallway collapsing inward. And then, the door swung open, and on the other side, there was nothing. A black void stretching endlessly. Cold air pulled at me, dragging me toward it like a gaping mouth ready to swallow me whole. The woman grabbed my wrist. "This is the only way out." I stared into the darkness. My stomach twisted with a primal, gut-wrenching fear. Something waited in that void. Something worse than the guests. The hallway behind us collapsed, doors crumbling into the walls. Shadows surging forward like a living thing. We had seconds to decide. Stay in the motel, or step into the unknown. And then, the blackness reached for us. The darkness pulled. Not like gravity, not like wind, this was different. It felt alive, wrapping around my limbs, dragging me forward without touching me. The woman clutched my wrist. "Jump," she hissed. My body refused. My mind screamed no. Every instinct I had told me that stepping into that void meant never coming back. Behind us, the motel collapsed. Walls warping, floors splitting open like something beneath it was trying to crawl out. The guests, if they were ever really guests, were moving toward us in unnatural, twitching jerks, their heads snapping side to side like broken puppets. And then, the manager appeared, not walking, not running. He was just there, right in front of us. His eyes were completely black now, no whites, no pupils. His face shifted like it was made of something liquid. "You were doing so well," he said, voice smooth, empty. "You almost made it." The shadows moved around him, curling at his feet like smoke. I gritted my teeth. What the hell is this place? The woman tightened her grip on my wrist. "Don't listen to him, jump!" The manager tilted his head too far, the skin at his neck stretching like wax. "Where do you think that door leads?" he said, gesturing to the black void. "Do you think it's an exit?" A cold dread settled in my stomach. He smiled. Too wide. "There's no leaving, kid. Not through there. Not through anywhere." I didn't want to believe him, but something deep inside me did. The woman pulled me hard toward the void. "He's lying. If we stay, we become them. I turned back to the manager. His smile had disappeared. The guests surged forward. I had no choice. I jumped, and everything went black, falling, not fast, not slow, just endless. The darkness wasn't empty. It whispered, not words, just sounds, wet clicking, distant voices, laughter that wasn't laughter. I tried to scream. My mouth wouldn't open. The woman was falling beside me, her hair whipping around her face. Her eyes met mine, and I saw fear. Not the kind you get when you're scared of the dark. The kind you get when you realize you've made a mistake. Then, we stopped, not like landing. There was no impact, no jolt, just... Suddenly we were somewhere else. I sucked in a sharp breath. My lungs burned, my body felt wrong, like I had been turned inside out and stitched back together. I blinked. Light, dimensions flickering. The glow of a neon sign. The buzzing was the first thing I recognized. Then, the hum of an old air conditioning unit. The distant sound of a TV playing something unintelligible. I was in a motel office, not the same one, but almost the same one. The Moonlight Motel sign outside wasn't flickering anymore. It glowed a sickly red, the letters shifting slightly like they were trying to spell something else. The woman sat beside me, breathing hard. Number no. She stood up suddenly, gripping the counter. We were supposed to get out. I swallowed thickly. Maybe we did. She turned to look at me. Does this look like out to you? I didn't answer because outside in the parking lot, there were cars, not abandoned, not rusted, running, idling, full of people who looked normal. A man leaned against a truck, smoking a cigarette. A woman adjusted her mirror in a silver sedan. A couple dragged suitcases toward the front door. It looked like a real motel, like any motel, except for one thing. The manager was still behind the desk, not the same one, not exactly, but he looked right at me and smiled, like he knew me, like he had been waiting. A sick realization curdled in my stomach. I turned to the woman. She was staring at the guest log on the counter. Her hands were shaking. I stepped closer, looked over her shoulder, and there they were. Our names, written neatly in black ink, checked in, but never checked out. The woman stepped back. This isn't real. My head felt light, the air too thick. I turned back to the window, staring at the parking lot, and that's when I saw it. One of the guests, a woman standing near the vending machines, still, too still, not blinking, not moving, and then... Her face shifted, just for a second, like something else was underneath it, wearing it. And I realized none of these people were real. None of them had ever left, and neither would we. I couldn't breathe. The woman clutched my arm so tight it hurt, her nails digging into my skin. She was still staring at the guest log, her breath coming in shallow gasps. We never left. The words hit me like a gut punch. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to say something logical, something rational, but I couldn't, because I knew she was right. The parking lot, the guests, the manager. It was all too perfect. The motel looked normal. But I had already seen what was beneath the surface, and so had she. We have to go, I whispered. She nodded, snapping out of her daze. We turned toward the door, and he was standing there. The manager, not behind the desk this time, blocking the exit. His black eyes bore into me, and his smile stretched just a little too wide. Leaving so soon? His voice was calm, casual, as if we hadn't just fallen through a nightmare. The woman grabbed my wrist, pulling me toward the side door. I didn't hesitate. We ran through the hall, past the guests, things in human skin, their faces flickering as they turned toward us, their eyes vacant, watching. We burst through the emergency exit and into the parking lot. The cars were gone. The people were gone. The world outside the motel was wrong. The road stretched forever, a perfect unbroken black highway vanishing into an empty, starless sky. No moon, no streetlights, no sound. I turned in a slow circle, my breath turning to ice in my chest. We were alone. The woman grabbed my shoulders. There has to be a way out. I nodded because I had to believe it. But then... the neon sign flickered. I turned toward it, my stomach twisting. It no longer said Moonlight Motel. The letters shifted, warping, buzzing, rearranging themselves into something new. A single word, stay. And then... the front doors swung open and the guests began to step outside. Slow, jerky, twitching like broken dolls, their heads twisted unnaturally, their smiles stretching too far. The manager walked out last, hands in his pockets. He looked at us with something close to amusement. "You can run," he said, "but you'll only come back." I swallowed hard, my skin crawled. "What do you mean?" I asked, though deep down I already knew. His smile widened. "You've always been here." The world lurched. The motel blinked, flickering, stretching, glitching like a dying signal. The parking lot melted into the lobby, the sky folded into wallpaper, and suddenly, we were inside again, standing at the front desk, the guest log open. 2 new names written inside, mine. Heron checked in, never checked out. My head spun, my stomach lurched. I reached for the door again. But it wasn't there anymore, just hallways. Endless hallways stretching out where the exit should have been. The floor throbbed beneath my feet. The walls warped like breathing flesh. The woman shook her head violently. No, this isn't real." But it was. The manager leaned against the counter, watching us with mild curiosity. "You don't get it, do you?" he said. "There's no out, no escape, no waking up." His black eyes glittered. "This place is a mouth, and it already swallowed you." I backed away. "That's bullshit. If we got in, we can get out." He chuckled. "You never got in." He tapped the guest log. "You've always been here." I felt sick. I turned to the woman. "We're leaving." She nodded quickly. "We're leaving." We took off down the hall, but the motel moved with us. The walls stretched, the lights flickered. The air grew thicker, like we were running through something alive. Doors opened on their own, revealing things that weren't human. Figures standing in the dark, their faces melting, their eyes watching. Then, a room door swung open in front of us. Room 9. Our room. The one we had never left. Inside, the TV was on, playing static. The bed was made, and on the pillows were 2 perfect imprints, like someone had been lying there just seconds ago. I froze. My stomach dropped. The woman's breath hitched. "No." She turned to me, her eyes wide and hollow. "We're still in the bed." The words barely left her lips before the walls collapsed inward. The motel shrieked, the floor split open, and I saw something beneath it all. Endless rooms. Endless hallways. A never-ending maze of twisting, shifting spaces. The truth hit me all at once. This wasn't a motel, it was a trap. A place that pulled people in, that made them forget, that kept them running forever, searching for a way out that never existed. The guests weren't people. They were the ones who stopped running. And now, we were becoming them. The last thing I heard was the manager's voice. Calm, smooth, final. "Welcome home." For the past few days, I've had this unshakable feeling of being watched constantly. Don't get me wrong, I checked everything, and nothing seemed out of place. But the feeling won't leave me alone. There's nothing wrong with my mental state. I'll break it down for you. I've always been athletic ever since school. Even though I graduated college years ago, I kept my workout routine solid to maintain my health and discipline. Running is my go-to exercise, mainly because I love it, but also because gym memberships are ridiculously expensive. There's this park where I train every day. It's small, but I like it. Being outdoors gives me some quiet, some peace, time to clear my head. But there's a downside. It's an old park built decades ago, and sometimes the lights go out. When that happens, I either cancel my run or find somewhere else to go. Back to my story. I had just finished my run and was walking towards the park entrance. It was late, 8:43 p.m. I don't know if time is important, but I feel like I should mention everything. If something happens to me, I want you to have all the details. That night, the park was empty. It's never empty. Usually there are people walking their dogs, riding bikes, just hanging around. But not that night. Just me, the benches, and the lampposts lining the path. As I slowed my pace, something hit my shoe. I looked down and saw it, a phone. Not a smartphone, but one of those old ones with a tiny screen and a keyboard. I picked it up. Maybe I could find the owner's info and return it. But as I scrolled through the menu, a notification popped up. I clicked it without thinking. My stomach dropped. It was a picture of me. Took from my back, someone had sent it to this phone. The number was hidden. How? Before I could react, I heard something behind me. A whistle. 3 sharp high notes. It pierced through the silence and sent a chill down my spine. My heart stopped. My brain screamed one word, run. I bolted, full speed. I glanced back once. There was nothing, no one. And yet, there was. I can't explain it. I saw something, a figure, tall, too tall, dressed in black, standing by the bushes, watching me from a neighbor's yard. But it wasn't human. The shape was human, but the proportions were wrong. The head was too long, stretched vertically 3 times the length of a normal person's skull. The arms were ridiculously thin and long. Maybe I was dizzy from running, but I swear, it was real. It was staring at me, but with no eyes at all. Just 2 hollow cavities looking at me. I sprinted all the way home. 14 minutes. I barely remember getting inside, locking the door and collapsing onto the couch. And the phone? I brought it with me. Biggest mistake of my life. I told myself I wouldn't touch it again unless someone called. Maybe I could return it and be done with these weird stuff. I showered, went to bed, passed out immediately from exhaustion. Everything was fine. Until a noise woke me up, glass shattering from the kitchen. I flinched, heart racing. I don't have pets, no kids around. My neighbors are all old. No one should be in my house. I got up, slowly. The floor creaked under my steps. Then, the whistle, same 3 notes, lower this time. The sound grew louder with every step I took until by the 9th step it stopped, replaced by breathing. From inside the walls, I froze. My own breath caught in my throat. The breathing went on for 30 long seconds, then a whisper from the next room. When I finally stepped into the kitchen, nothing was broken. Just a plate, sitting in the middle of the counter. I stared at it. Confused, too tired to care, I went back to bed. The next morning it was still there. I put it away. Weird, but harmless. Then it happened again. The next morning, the same plate, same spot, then again. By the 3rd day, I started to feel sick. Like something was wrong with me. Like I was being pulled into something I couldn't escape. Then May 17th happened. That night, the phone rang. I picked it up. Silence. 30 seconds. Then, a cough. And a voice, low, raspy. Andrew, I see you. My blood turned to ice. I hung up. How come he knows my name? Hands shaking, heart pounding. I stared at the phone, willing it to disappear. Then my own phone buzzed. A notification, a photo. Taken from the top corner of my room. Like a security camera shot. I could see myself, lying in bed, staring at my phone. I looked up. Nothing was there. Then, another notification. A text. Like what you see? I screamed. Called 911. The cops came, searched my house. Nothing. They stayed all night. I didn't feel safe, even with them there. Morning came. The plate was back. But this time, there was something written on it. A number, drawn in dark red ink or something else. I scrubbed it, but as the water hit the plate, I realized it wasn't ink, it was blood. The next day, another plate, another number. It was different, though. It was written with human nails. Then 4. That time, the nails were swapped with eyes. Human eyes. Then 3. No numbers anymore, but organs. Fresh, moving, as if they'd been ripped out seconds before. By then I was getting photos of myself sleeping every night. Then day 2 came. The plate disappeared. I received a call. I picked up. The voice whispered, 2. Then a message, a photo. I opened it, a human face, cautiously peeled off from a head. I ran. Left my house, booked a hotel. I'm here now, writing this. It's 9:21 p.m. I can't do this anymore. Tomorrow is day 1. I know what's coming. If you see me on the news, know this. Never pick up a phone from the street. Delve into the city's eerie past with a guided tour of its most historic and haunted locations. Real history, real ghosts, real scary. The ad for the Candlelight Ghost Tour was accompanied by a host of 5-star reviews. I went out of curiosity. It was hokey, hoaxy, but not bad entertainment for an evening. Our guide arrived with a small battery-operated candle, not a real one. They were nerdy, nervous, and intensely knowledgeable about local history. Anytime someone on the tour asked about this old Victorian building or that old fountain or anything else in the historic district of our tour, the guide's eyes would roll back like a computer loading screen, and then out of their mouth would pop an answer, like a human Wikipedia. Still, it was entertaining, especially the talk of murders in some of the stately mansions. I suppose every street has some history of crime. But usually you don't have a tour guide narrating which rich person was pushed out of which window. By the time we got to the park, though, my patience was wearing thin. It was a cold winter night, the snow slushy under our shoes, all of us shivering in our coats, hands and feet freezing. What we really came to see, our guide informed us, was inside the park, just past the fountain that was currently closed for the weather. At the other side was an alcove where the park wall curved, and built along it was a stone bench. Above the bench, carved into the wall, was a relief sculpture of dancing figures. The guide's flashlight beamed across the figures, tortured human shapes in strange poses. "This park was founded over 100 years ago," said the guide. "Originally, the sculpture was supposed to represent people enjoying themselves in the park. But as you can see, the figures are strangely contorted." By this point, I was shivering so hard that I'd had about enough of the ghostly nonsense. I stopped listening to the guide and instead studied the relief sculpture with its 6 tortured figures. The last figure appeared to be sitting, pulling away from one of the dancers whose hand gripped their shoulder. The sitting figure had arms folded and appeared affronted at the dance. On impulse, to alleviate boredom and get my blood pumping, I jumped past our guide and into the alcove, sat on the bench by the relief sculpture and mimicked the pose of the sitting figure, arms crossed, glaring at the dancers as if taken aback by their nonsense. The crowd of tour-goers laughed. The guide blinked at me, goggle-eyed. "Oh," they said. "Oh, I never go in the alcove." Some of the other tour-goers had taken out their phones to snap pictures of me, so I held my pose, still miming the sitting figure. Our guide, meanwhile, prattled on about how sometimes people in the park feel the temperature drop, or find themselves shivering or their breath freezing. My breath was freezing. Duh, it's winter. It had been freezing for a while. Someone's hand gripped my shoulder, and I shot up off the bench. I figured one of the other tour-goers was pranking me, sneaking behind me while the guide babbled, but it was just the wall behind me. I skittered back out to the crowd where they all laughed, assuming I faked my startlement for effect. I was so surprised I didn't even try to make excuses for myself, just blurted out, "I felt a hand just now, on my shoulder." Some oohs and ahs from the crowd. The tour guide pushed up their glasses and suggested we all check our phone pictures. All the pictures of me looked normal. I didn't see any hand in any of them, though one person said they were sure they saw a shadow behind me. "Yeah, that's my shadow," I told them. I had them send me the picture anyway as a souvenir, and decided that I must have imagined the hand. After another 40 minutes trudging around in the cold past churches and cemeteries, hearing lectures on history and ghosts, the tour was over. I was frozen to the bone and glad to go home. But when I got home, after I shed my thick coat and boots and hurried into the hot shower to warm my frozen flesh, just as I was getting out, I felt it. The brush of fingers on my bare shoulder. I actually screamed and jumped out of the shower. There was nobody. Nothing. It felt so real, though. And for the next few days after, periodically, I'd notice it. A weight on my shoulder, as of a hand. Over the days it grew heavier, as if wanting me to notice it was there. And sometimes, when I'd forget about the grip, I'd be reminded when the fingers would squeeze. When I found bruises one morning, after I woke screaming from a nightmare and felt the fingers gripping agonizingly hard, I finally went to the doctor. They said it looked like someone had definitely grabbed me, not a spirit, but an actual person's hand clenching. They asked if I'd been in a fight or if I felt safe at home. I didn't know what to say. Later I went back to the park. I went and stared at the sculpture. At the sitting figure. I noticed again how the sitting figure seemed to be invited in, no, pulled in by the other dancers. How there was a hand on the sitting figure's right shoulder squeezing. That hand on the figure's shoulder had to be what was on my shoulder. How could I make it let go? When I turned to leave, I stopped in my tracks. Because the invisible grip had tightened. It was so tight, almost like a vice. Tears sprang into my eyes from how much it hurt. "Leave me alone!" I shouted, wrenching free. I stumbled and fell out of the alcove to the pavement and snowy ground. A couple of passers-by walking their dog looked over at me. I just scrambled up, embarrassed, and fled. As soon as I got out of the park, the grip on my shoulder lightened. But then as I was at the corner, waiting to cross the street, something else happened. Something even more terrifying. A car was coming and I felt it push me. Next thing I knew, I was stumbling into the street and the car slammed its brakes and screeched to a halt while the grip on my shoulder shoved me almost under its wheels. I finally broke loose, babbling apologies to the driver, and hurried home. That's when I called the tour guide. I left message after message on their voicemail. Finally, they called me back. "Help," I sputtered. "I still feel it, the hand on my shoulder. I think it's trying to kill me. What was the story behind that sculpture again? The dancing figures, tell me." I hoped there might be some information that might free me. The tour guide was silent for some moments, and I imagined their eyes rolling back as they sifted through their encyclopedic knowledge and brought up the entry on that relief sculpture. "Oh yes," they said, and explained the story again, how it was originally meant to represent parkgoers enjoying themselves. Nobody knows when, but at some point people began noticing that the dancing figures appeared contorted and agonized, and that the central figure looked especially demonic. Supposedly the dancers are all people who went missing, and the central figure is a demonic spirit that haunts the park. He can be seen sometimes walking around the fountain, or in photographs behind those who are soon to disappear. "But how do I make it let go?" I asked. "Well, to be honest, I've never heard of anybody feeling its presence outside of the park," said the guide. "And the figure didn't show up in the photo with you. Just don't go back to the park." No, you don't understand. I still feel it. It's gripping my shoulder right now." "Gripping your shoulder?" The guide sounded confused. More and more, I was beginning to feel like they didn't ever get calls like this. Like maybe they too assumed it was all a hoax and didn't buy into the things they told people. "What's gripping your shoulder?" "The hand. Just like in the sixth figure, the sitting one on the end." "Six?" The guide interrupted, and I could hear the encyclopedic riffling of their thoughts. "Number 5. "No, I was copying the pose of the sixth, the sitting one. 5, said the guide firmly. "Definitely 5. Listen, the one I was copying. There are 5, and they are all dancing. Do you remember my lecture from the park? I talked about the central figure. If there were 6, there would be no central figure. It would be 3 and 3 split evenly. There are 5, 2 on each side of the central figure. There is no sixth figure." And then the guide, sounding thoughtful, added, "Yet." I didn't hear what they said after that. I was scouring through my phone until finally I found the picture with the shadow behind me that the other tour-goer had sent. There I was, sitting posed with my arms crossed, glaring at the relief sculpture. But the guide was right. There were only 5 figures visible in the photograph, all dancing. The hand is squeezing my shoulder now as I type this. I don't know how long before I get pushed into traffic, or yanked off a bridge, or held down in the bathtub. The hand squeezes almost constantly now. Nobody believes me, but I'm posting this for the record. If you take the candlelight ghost tour and see the alcove with the dancing parkgoers, count the figures. You'll know what happened to me if you count, and there are 6. People pay me to scare them, not in a fun haunted house kind of way. My job is more personal, tailored. I find what gets under your skin and make it real, at least for a little while. Some people get a rush from it, others just want to feel something. I have rules though. I never touch anyone, I never actually break anything, and I never ever take a job unless I know every detail first. So when I got a job offer from an anonymous client willing to pay double my usual rate, I should have known something was off. "Make him believe the house is haunted," the client said. "Make him believe something's inside with him." Easy enough. I'd done it 100 times before. The house was an old Victorian on the edge of town, isolated, surrounded by overgrown trees that swallowed the streetlights. The kind of place that already felt haunted. The client's brother had moved in a week prior. No family, no visitors. Just him alone in a big house, perfect target. I arrived at midnight, no car in the driveway, no lights on. I picked the lock easily. This wasn't breaking and entering, not really. I was invited. The second I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. The air was thick, wrong like the pressure before a thunderstorm. It smelled faintly sweet, like rotting fruit and something else. Something wet and metallic. I brushed it off and got to work. I started with small things, shifted furniture just slightly, left doors half open, whispered through the vents just enough to make the air hum. Simple tricks. Things that get into your head and make you question what you know you did. Then I heard it. A shuffle of movement from upstairs. I froze. The client said his brother would be home, but I hadn't seen any sign of him. No shoes by the door, no dishes in the sink. The house felt empty. Then came the footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming down the stairs. I held my breath and pressed myself into the shadows. I've been caught before, but I know how to hide. My eyes adjusted, and that's when I saw it. It wasn't a man. Not anymore. A thing stood at the top of the stairs. A twisted, grotesque version of a human, its body unnaturally long and skeletal. Its skin was translucent, stretched tight over elongated limbs, veins pulsing beneath like they were about to burst. It had the twisted frame of a human but spindly legs. Legs like an insect's, ending in sharp, twitching talons that scraped against the wooden floor. Its body was covered in a fine, oily black fur that glistened in the dim light. Its face was where the nightmare began. A massive, bulbous head with too many eyes, glassy and black, flickered all over its skin. They weren't arranged neatly like a spider's. They were scattered in irregular patterns, one near its jaw, another on its forehead, some just under its chin, blinking in a maddening, unpredictable rhythm. The thing's mouth. No, it wasn't a mouth. It was a horrific, churning mass of jagged, needle-like teeth, all constantly moving as if they were fighting to break free from its face. It opened impossibly wide, its jaw unhinging like a snake's, stretching down to its chest. Then I saw its hands. Its hands were wrong in a way that made my stomach twist. They weren't hands at all. They were spider legs, long, segmented, and twitching. They were like thick black antennae that twitched with violent energy, bending and unfurling as they scraped against the wall. I could feel the heat in my throat rise. I should have turned and run. I should have done anything but stay frozen. But the thing wasn't finished. It tilted its head. The sound of its neck cracking echoed through the house like dry twigs snapping underfoot. Then it spoke. Its voice wasn't human. It sounded like a distorted, garbled hiss mixed with a sharp, skittering click, like the sound of 1,000 bugs crawling in the dark. You shouldn't have come. Before I could even process the words, the thing lunged, but not with speed. It moved in jerks like it was still learning how to control its body. Its legs clicked and bent with disturbing precision, the long, sharp appendages scraping against the floor with every movement. My body moved before my brain could catch up. I ran. I bolted toward the door, and the sound of it pursuing, scratching, scraping, skittering, was deafening. Every part of me screamed to get out, to survive. Then, just as my hand gripped the door handle, the lights went out. The house went black. I couldn't see. I couldn't breathe. My heart thundered in my ears as I fumbled in the dark, and that's when I felt it. Ice-cold legs crawling across my back, their jagged tips scraping my skin like they were testing the flesh. I wrenched open the door and tore through the hallway, not looking back. I don't know how I got to the car, my hands so slick with sweat I could hardly grip the wheel. But I know one thing. As I pulled out of the driveway, I looked in the rearview mirror. That thing was standing at the top of the stairs, its eyes flashing in the window. It tilted its head and, with one last horrifying click, smiled. I left town that same night, the cold fear still crawling under my skin. I haven't stopped driving, I haven't looked back, and I swear, I will never, ever scare anyone again. I moved into my apartment about a year ago. It's nothing fancy. Just a small one-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a pretty old building. The kind of place where you can hear everything. Footsteps in the hall, pipes groaning in the walls, muffled voices through the vents. The guy who lived next door to me was an older man named Mr. Solomon. He kept to himself, always wearing the same gray cardigan, always shuffling down the hall with his head down. I tried saying hi a few times, but he never really responded, just nodded and kept walking. Then the notes started appearing. They were small, folded pieces of paper, slipped under my door. No envelope, no explanation. Just short, scribbled messages in shaky handwriting. The first one said, "Do not let it know you see it." I remember laughing, thinking it was some weird old man paranoia, maybe dementia. I tossed it in the trash and didn't think about it again, until I got another one. "It watches you when you sleep." Okay, creepy. But still, I figured it was just harmless nonsense. Maybe Mr. Solomon had been watching too many horror movies. I ignored that one too. Then came the 3rd note. "Check your closet, do it now." That one got to me. I actually did get up and check, half expecting to find something horrible. But there was nothing. Just my clothes, my shoes, and a pile of laundry I kept putting off. I almost went next door to tell Mr. Solomon to stop, but I didn't want to be rude. He was old, probably lonely. so I let it go. Then 3 nights ago, I woke up to the sound of scratching. It was soft, rhythmic, coming from inside my closet. At first I thought maybe it was a mouse, but the longer I lay there, the more it sounded deliberate. Slow, like something inside was waiting for me to notice. I didn't move, I didn't breathe. I just stared at the closet door, heart hammering. After what felt like hours, the scratching finally stopped. The next morning I found another note under my door. It knows you heard it. That was when I decided to talk to Mr. Solomon. I knocked on his door, but there was no answer. I tried again, nothing. Later that evening I asked the landlord if he was okay. The landlord just gave me a strange look and said, "Mr. Solomon, he moved out 2 weeks ago." I felt my stomach drop. That was impossible. I had just gotten a note from him the night before. I went back to my apartment, my mind racing. If Mr. Solomon was gone, then who had been slipping me those notes? That night I barely slept. I kept hearing things, soft shuffling sounds, the occasional creak of my closet door. I tried to tell myself it was my imagination. Then last night I woke up to the worst sound yet. Breathing. Right next to my bed. It was slow, shallow. Not mine, not human. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to that ragged breathing. Then, from the darkness, a whisper. "You should have listened." I don't remember what happened after that. Maybe I passed out. Maybe I ran. All I know is when I woke up this morning, my closet door was wide open, and there was one last note on my nightstand. "It likes you now." I'm writing this from my car. I don't think I'm going back inside. This may be the last recorded message of the human race. As far as I know, I haven't seen another living person post anything online in years. I'm pretty sure everyone is either dead or no longer human. I tried to save my family. I truly did. But I couldn't reach them in time. I couldn't reach anyone. There was no time. I don't even know how I managed to escape without being turned, without becoming one of them. I suppose I should explain what happened. It started when scientists discovered ancient bacteria, viruses, and fungi thawing in Antarctica. Pathogens that had been sealed away for over 50,000 years were suddenly loose upon the world. Some people contracted variations of the plague. Others suffered respiratory infections that rotted their lungs from the inside out. But then there were those who became infected with C. magnificus, the oldest known species of cordyceps. The infected weren't mindless, ravenous monsters. This wasn't some cliché zombie outbreak. No, this was worse. When a person contracts C. magnificus, their pupils expand until their eyes are nothing but deep black voids, empty, inhuman. They no longer speak, at least not in words. Instead, they click. Their cheek muscles stretch impossibly tight, locking them in a grotesque permanent grin. Their gums turn a sickly pale pink-white, and their teeth gradually yellow, as if their body is slowly surrendering to decay while keeping them alive. But the worst part? They aren't violent. They're calculated. They do whatever it takes to spread their infection, and the way they do it, it broke whatever hope I had left for humanity. It wasn't just through biting or airborne spores. They spread it through fluids. They took over by infiltrating, violating, consuming. They used human bodies like breeding grounds, like incubators, until they had been fully drained of life. Until the fruiting bodies burst free, ready to be devoured by the animals of the earth. I saw it happen. I was hiding in an old motel when a woman stumbled into the parking lot gasping for help. I almost ran to her. Almost. But then I saw them, 3 of them, standing in the open, watching. Their black eyes locked on her as she screamed. But they didn't chase her. They just waited. She collapsed and one of them finally moved. Slow, deliberate steps, its grin unwavering. It knelt beside her, caressed her face with fingers that had started to sprout something. Thin, pale tendrils curling from beneath the nails. She was too weak to fight when its mouth met hers. I knew what it was doing. Spreading. Seeding. By the time she stopped struggling, the others had already started to peel her clothes away. I turned and ran before I could see what happened next. But I heard it. The wet sounds. The gasping. The clicking. The laughter. If you could even call it that. A hollow, buzzing noise like something vibrating inside their throats. I didn't sleep that night. I don't really sleep at all anymore. Every time I close my eyes, I see them in the darkness, smiling, clicking, waiting, a cleansing. the planet's way of fighting back, of erasing the disease that was humanity. I always saw us as a cancer to this world. Maybe this was inevitable. Maybe Earth was always going to release its white blood cells and wipe us out. But I don't want to live in this world anymore. I've been drifting on this ship for too long. I see the shore now, but I know what waits for me there. It's time to accept my fate. If anyone, anything, finds this transmission or my journal, know this. The Earth does not take kindly to abuse. Farewell. I started my YouTube channel after I lost my job. I worked in customer service for a big telecom company. Basically, I was a human punching bag for people with bad reception and even worse tempers. But the worst part wasn't the angry customers. It was knowing they were right. The company was overpriced garbage. They didn't care about their clients. So one day I told a customer to switch to the competition. The call was recorded for training purposes. A week later, my keycard didn't work anymore. Of course, I knew the call was recorded. I just didn't want the job anymore, and then came the free time. A lot of it. For most people, that would be a dream. But for me, the emptiness just ate me alive. After 2 weeks, I was ready to call my boss and beg for my old job back. And I would have, if I hadn't run into an old school friend at the supermarket. Tom had been the quiet, nerdy type in school. But the guy I met in the parking lot was nothing like the kid I remembered. He was tall, well-dressed, and carried himself with an easy confidence. He had that kind of energy people talk about when they say someone has found their center, whatever that's supposed to mean. We started talking. He told me he was a YouTuber, a content creator. He had a channel about cartooning, one about baseball, and his biggest success was a channel where he posted body cam footage from police operations. You make a living from that? I asked. Turns out he not only made enough money, but he also enjoyed his work. Maybe that's why he had such a positive vibe. He liked going to work in the morning. He didn't hate his boss. He didn't have annoying coworkers to avoid. He gave me his number and told me I should try YouTube too. It takes time to build a community and start making money, but he said it was worth it. And what should I make videos about? Well, the thing you love the most. I drove home and thought about it. What do I love the most? I don't know much about cars. I don't care about sports. And watching cops beat up innocent people doesn't seem all that interesting to me. The only thing that came to mind was cleaning. I don't love the end result of cleaning, the order itself, but the process. Watching something wild and chaotic slowly fade away, replaced by calm and structure, fills me with a deep sense of peace. The emptiness disappears, and for a moment my existence in this world doesn't feel so meaningless. Cleaning was the only thing that made my unemployment bearable. I spent the first half of the day turning my apartment into a complete mess, just so I could enjoy cleaning it up in the second half. That was my drug. So I started filming myself while cleaning my apartment. I uploaded the videos and then nothing happened. Just like Tom had predicted. At first, no one cares. But that didn't bother me. The views didn't matter because I still got that same rush from cleaning. Then everything changed. My first viral hit. When I take the bus to the supermarket, the route passes by a cemetery. One day I glanced over the small stone wall and noticed an old, completely abandoned grave. The foundation had sunk, and the weed-covered slab was tilted into the earth. The headstone was covered in moss and dirt, the inscription long unreadable. The next day, I went to the cemetery groundskeeper and asked who was buried there. He checked his records but couldn't give me a name. All I can see in my system is that the burial rights expired in 1987. The family never renewed them. So that means no one takes care of the grave, I asked. The groundskeeper nodded. Technically, we could dissolve it, but since modern burials are becoming more minimalist and space-efficient, we don't really need the extra room. I asked if I could take care of the grave. He looked at me with a mix of suspicion and curiosity. I pulled out my phone, showed him my YouTube channel, and tried to convince him that I wasn't crazy. The relatives haven't shown up in 40 years, he said, scratching his head. I don't think they'll show up now and have a problem with it. I set up my camera tripod on the small gravel path and got to work. Around me were either old gravestones or open graves, so I had peace. First, I trimmed the wild hydrangea bush, its branches hanging over the gravestone, and pulled out the weeds from the ground. I got some soil from the garden center and filled the gap under the grave slab to level it out. The next day, I worked on the slab and the headstone. I first used a wooden spade to remove the moss and dirt, then scrubbed the sandstone with pH-neutral soap. After the third round, the headstone regained its original color, lava gray. Once that was done, I cleaned the inscriptions, ornaments, and engravings with a toothbrush until they were legible. Beneath the name and the birth and death dates was a line: "Forget me not, or I won't forget you." I thought about that last line a lot while I packed up my stuff and took down the tripod. Why would someone have something like that carved on their gravestone? Was it a threat? Or was she known for her sense of humor? And maybe it was her way of leaving a parting gift for the world? I drove home, worked on the video late into the night, uploaded it, and went to sleep. That night I slept badly and had a strange nightmare. I was trapped in some kind of steel oven, surrounded by naked people with animal heads instead of their own. Then the fire appeared under the oven, and we were all baked alive. The half-human, half-animal creatures screamed, trying to push themselves up away from the flames. I had no chance and was pressed down toward the fire. Even though it was just a dream, I felt the pain and fear. I was pushed against the hot floor, and the smell of my burning skin filled my nose, followed by blinding pain and desperate screams. When I woke up, my chest hurt and felt burned even though there were no signs of injury. The feeling went away, especially when I checked my YouTube account. The cemetery video had gone viral overnight. It had been online for less than 6 hours and already had 109,876 views, and my subscribers jumped to 2,318. The numbers kept growing throughout the day, and by evening, 876,909 people had watched the video and were discussing it. While some thought it was nice that someone had finally taken care of the grave, others felt I had disturbed the privacy and peace of the grave just for clicks. Less than 24 hours after I uploaded the video, I hit the magic mark of 1 million views. And with the success came the first collaboration requests from companies that made cleaning products and cleaning tools. Tom also reached out and congratulated me on the success. He said it would have taken him over a year to hit 1 million. Apparently, I was some kind of natural talent. He also wanted to collaborate with me. A noise woke me up that night. I tried to get up and check, but suddenly I couldn't move my body. I screamed with all my strength, but no sound came out. The more I fought it, the weaker I became. Then I saw a shadow, the silhouette of a woman, as she entered the room and leaned over me. I fell into a dark hole. I lost all will to live. Everything bad and evil that had happened to me in my life suddenly came back to me. It was like sitting in an empty movie theater, watching the worst moments of my life on the huge screen. The tragic death of my parents, the child who only lived until the second trimester, the failed marriage, the drug addiction. I saw it all so clearly. I was worthless and deserved to die. Yes, it was my duty to throw myself out the window right now or slit my throat with a knife. The loud knocking at the door woke me from my sleep. It had been a strange and terrifyingly realistic dream. Do you know that feeling of relief when you realize it was all just a dream and you're safe? That feeling didn't come to me. I still felt miserable as I opened the door with a heavy heart, the words on the gravestone echoing in my mind, "Forget me not, or I won't forget you." 2 police officers stood at the door and wanted to speak with me. One of them showed me the cemetery video on his phone and asked if that was me. "Yes," I said, rubbing my face, "but I had the gardener's permission." "And you were just taking care of the grave?" "Yes." "Is that all you did?" "Listen, what's the problem? Should I delete the video or what?" The officers exchanged a brief glance. "We've received a report of grave desecration." "Grave desecration? You've seen the video, right? If anything, it was a grave upgrade. Someone opened the grave last night and stole the remains." He handed me his phone showing crime scene photos, and sure enough, the grave slab had been moved aside and a deep hole had been dug. "Who did this?" "We're trying to find that out. The grave has been there for 90 years with no incidents. And right after you make a video about it, something happens. Don't you think that's a bit strange?" "A coincidence," I mumbled to myself, thinking of the nightmare. We were taught at the police academy not to believe in coincidences. There's always a causal link, and we'll find it. The officer stood up and paused for a moment. "Can I use your bathroom?" "Second door on the left." He went into the bathroom, and I walked with the other cop down the hall when suddenly his partner appeared. I couldn't quite read his look. It was a mix of awe and satisfaction. "I told you we always find a connection." There was satisfaction in his voice. He gestured toward my bathroom. and in the bathtub lay the reason for the awe in his tone. The entire bathroom was filled with black soil, and in the tub were the bones from the grave, covered in dirt and brittle with age. I tried to explain to the officers that I had no idea how the bones ended up in my apartment, but of course they didn't believe me. I was arrested and spent the night in a cell. As they led me away in handcuffs, I couldn't stop thinking about the words I had read on the gravestone. "Forget me not, or I won't forget you." He went into the bathroom, and I walked with the other cop down the hall, when suddenly his partner appeared. I couldn't quite read his look. It was a mix of awe and satisfaction. "I told you, we always find a connection." There was satisfaction in his voice. He gestured toward my bathroom, and in the bathtub lay the reason for the awe in his tone. The entire bathroom was filled with black soil, and in the tub were the bones from the grave, covered in dirt and brittle with age. I tried to explain to the officers that I had no idea how the bones ended up in my apartment, but of course they didn't believe me. I was arrested and spent the night in a cell. As they led me away in handcuffs, I couldn't stop thinking about the words I had read on the gravestone. "Forget me not, or I won't forget you." They removed the bones from my apartment and reburied the remains. I was charged with disturbing the peace of the dead, grave desecration, and theft. The incident went public, and the media spun their own version of the story. I had cleaned the grave only to desecrate it afterward. A well-known influencer took the story further, claiming my goal was to turn it into a ghost story for my channel to gain more views. Other YouTubers jumped on the bandwagon, and it turned into a full-blown witch hunt against me. Videos about me and my satanic acts brought in good views, and even Tom made a video, claiming that during our meeting in the parking lot, I had allegedly talked about doing something forbidden for one of my videos. The cemetery video hit nearly 2 million views before YouTube took it down and banned me from the platform. All the sponsorship requests were canceled, and Tom stopped reaching out. Since then, I dreamed the same dream every night. Every time I burned in the oven along with the people with animal heads. So I slept less, which led my mind to play tricks on me. Over and over, I saw a shadow, the silhouette of a woman, wandering around my apartment. "Forget me not, or I won't forget you." It was all connected to her grave. So I started to dig deeper, first on the internet, then at the city archive. I found nothing about her childhood or youth, only a few newspaper clippings and excerpts from a book called The Black Cult. The book mentioned her name in connection with a group of occultists who had been experimenting with dark magic. In another article, there were reports of several deaths, supposedly linked to a curse she had placed on the victims. "Forget me not, or I won't forget you." And the darkness came into my life too. I couldn't get a job anymore because the whole country knew me as the clickbait grave desecrator. I couldn't pay my rent and had to leave my apartment. I had no one to turn to, no family, no friends. I was completely alone. Forget me not, or I won't forget you. For a week now, I've been living in a homeless shelter, and even here, misfortune follows me. Yesterday, I got into a fight with a heroin junkie who stabbed me in the stomach with a box cutter. The wound got infected, and the sharp pain spreads through my body in a slow, burning circle. Forget me not, or I won't forget you. I curl up in my sleeping bag and get ready to dream of the oven and the people with animal heads. Every night I burn again and wake up with invisible burns on my skin. Forget me not, or I won't forget you. When my daughter Alea started talking about an imaginary friend, I didn't think much of it. All children invent invisible companions at some point. But something about the way she spoke of Mr. Closet unsettled me. "He lives in my closet," she explained with the serious air of a 4-year-old. "But he only comes out when Mommy and Daddy aren't here." I found it both adorable and a little eerie. Still, I figured she would eventually forget about this game and that Mr. Closet would disappear just as suddenly as he had arrived. For the first few weeks, it was innocent. Alea would talk to herself in her room, sometimes giggle. Once, I heard her whispering as if she were sharing secrets with someone. One morning, I found her sitting in front of her wide-open closet, staring into the darkness with a vacant smile. "What are you doing, sweetheart?" I asked. "I'm waiting for Mr. Closet to wake up." A chill ran down my spine. There was something deeply unsettling in her voice. Then things took a darker turn. One night, as I passed by her room, I heard scratching. A dry, rhythmic sound like fingernails brushing against wood. Intrigued, I cracked the door open. Elia was sitting up in bed, eyes wide open, staring at her closet. I stepped closer. "You're not asleep, sweetheart?" "Shh, Daddy. Mr. Closet wants to come out." My blood ran cold. The scratching stopped immediately. I swung the closet door open, my heart pounding. There was nothing, just her clothes hanging neatly and a few stuffed animals piled in the corner. I told her she had been dreaming and tucked her back in. But that night, I hardly slept. A few days later, we found our cat, Simba, hiding under our bed, trembling and refusing to come out. Normally, he was curious about everything, but now he wouldn't go near Elea's room. I tried carrying him inside, but he clawed at my shoulder, hissing and shredding my shirt in his panic. Then Elea began to change. She grew quieter, more withdrawn. She would spend hours sitting in front of her closet. One evening, I caught her sliding a piece of paper under the door. "What are you doing, sweetheart?" She shrugged. "Mr. Closet asked me to draw him a picture." I picked up the paper. My heart nearly stopped. It wasn't a simple, childish scribble. She had drawn a tall, thin figure with an unnaturally wide grin and hollow eyes. "Does he look like this?" I asked, my throat dry. She nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, he told me he likes me a lot." That night I locked her closet, but by morning it was open again. Things got worse. Elea had dark circles under her eyes. She became even more distant. One morning I found her crying. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" "Mr. Closet says you don't like him, Daddy. He says you want him to leave." I held her close, trying to reassure her. But deep inside, I felt something watching us. That night I set up a surveillance camera in her room. I had to know what was happening. I can barely describe what I saw. Around 3 a.m., the closet door creaked open. A shadow emerged. It was impossibly tall, at least 8 feet. It bent over Elea's bed, its bony fingers brushing her face. Then it turned its head toward the camera, and it smiled, staring into the lens with hollow black eyes. A massive, unnatural grin stretched across its grotesque face, like something out of a twisted Picasso painting. It leaned over Elea and seemed to whisper something in her ear before slipping back into the closet, leaving the door wide open. I ran to her room, ripped out the camera, and grabbed my daughter. We left that house that night. We never went back. The next night, while staying in a hotel, I woke up with a jolt to find Elea standing there, staring blankly at the closet door. "Daddy, why is he here? He says he's angry." My heart skipped a beat. "Who, sweetheart?" She turned to me, her little eyes filling with tears. "Mr. Closet, he says we shouldn't have left." Then a dull thump echoed through the room, as if something was knocking softly against the wooden door. Elea started laughing, a strange, low-pitched laugh that didn't sound like her at all. "He's coming, Daddy." A sickening crack rang out. The closet door creaked open on its own, revealing an abyss of unnatural darkness. A freezing breath of air filled the room. Then, in a whisper barely audible, a hissing voice slithered out of the blackness. "You can't stop me from seeing her. I am her friend. But you, I don't like you." Elea walked into the closet. The door slammed shut behind her. I lunged forward, desperately trying to pull it open, but it wouldn't budge. I screamed her name, pounded on the wood until my fists were raw and bloody, but there was no sound. Nothing. When the authorities arrived, they had to break down the door. The closet was empty. No hidden passages, no way out. Elea was gone without a trace. Today I am in prison, accused of murdering my own daughter. An investigation was opened immediately after her disappearance. The hotel neighbors testified that they heard screaming, violent banging on the wood, and my desperate cries. To them, I was a father in the midst of a psychotic breakdown. My story about a shadow from the closet only sealed my fate in the eyes of the law. The police found no tangible evidence of an intruder. No forced entry, no fingerprints. Nothing that could explain what had happened. They searched the room, dismantled the closet, looked for hidden compartments. But Elea had simply vanished. The lack of a body worked against me. According to them, I must have hidden it somewhere. I pleaded my innocence, begged them to believe me. But who would believe a story like this? I have rotted in this cell for 3 years. The other inmates look at me with that mixture of pity and disgust reserved for those who hurt children. But I am not a monster. I am a victim. And I know that somewhere, trapped in an unreachable darkness, my daughter still exists. If you are listening this and your child talks about an imaginary friend who lives in their closet, please don't make him upset. I don't know why I'm posting this, but I need to get it out. I haven't slept properly in months, and even though we moved, I still wake up at night, expecting to hear him. It started when my roommate Kyle and I moved into a rental house last fall. We were both in college, struggling to find something affordable. When we found this place, a 2-bedroom for way below market rent, we didn't question it. The landlord was an older guy, a little too eager to sign the lease. He never did a proper walkthrough, just handed us the keys and told us to make ourselves at home. I remember joking to Kyle that the guy was weird, but at the time we were just happy to have a place. At first, things seemed normal. The house was a little run down, creaky floors, bad insulation, but nothing alarming. Then small things started happening. I'd come home and notice kitchen cabinets slightly open when I knew I had closed them. Sometimes food would be missing. Not whole meals, just little things. A slice of bread, a handful of crackers, a cup of juice gone. I asked Kyle, but he swore he wasn't taking my stuff. He started noticing it too. His leftovers would be moved or a light would be on that he was sure he had turned off. We joked about it. House is haunted, Kyle would say. But we were both starting to feel uneasy. Then one night I woke up around 3 a.m. to a sound that made my stomach drop. The unmistakable sound of breathing. It wasn't coming from Kyle's room, it was inside the walls. At first I told myself it was just my imagination. Maybe the pipes or the wind. But over the next few nights it happened again. Slow, shallow breathing, sometimes accompanied by soft shuffling sounds like someone shifting their weight. Then came the moment that made me realize we weren't alone. One evening I was home alone working on an assignment when I heard the fridge door open. I froze. I was the only one there. I grabbed a kitchen knife, heart pounding, and stepped into the hallway. The fridge door was swinging shut. I searched the house, checked every closet, under the beds, even the basement. No one was there. The doors were locked. It made no sense. I called Kyle, told him what happened. He came home immediately, and we decided to check the house top to bottom. That's when we noticed something strange. The hallway closet had an air vent near the floor. Not unusual, except it was loose. Kyle pulled it off, and behind it there was a hole. A space between the walls. A space just big enough for someone to crawl through. I don't know why, but I suddenly felt sick. We shined a flashlight inside, and the beam caught something that made my blood go cold. A dirty blanket, an empty water bottle, a crumpled granola bar wrapper. Someone had been living there. We didn't sleep that night. First thing in the morning, we called the landlord. He barely reacted, just sighed and said, thought I patched that up last time. Last time? That was when we learned the truth. The house had been rented out to multiple tenants before us, all of whom left suddenly. None of them stayed longer than a year. The landlord refused to say why. We got the cops involved, but by then the space was empty. Whoever had been living there was gone. The worst part? The officer who checked the place told us something that still makes my skin crawl. The hole in the wall? The dust around the edges had been recently disturbed. Whoever had been there was watching us, moving in and out while we slept. We broke our lease a month later. I don't care that we lost our deposit. I don't care that we had to crash on friends' couches until we found a new place. I just know that sometimes late at night I wake up thinking I hear breathing. And I wonder, did we leave him behind? Or did he follow us? For about 3 days now, my TV has been randomly switching over to network television onto a channel 77. I don't pay for cable and never have, as I've exclusively used streaming ever since I moved out. I currently live in an apartment with my roommate Jackson, who bought the TV itself, and he's never had any issues with it that he's mentioned. It almost feels like it's getting worse every day, as whenever it switches to the channel I can't get it to switch off for a period of time that seems to be getting longer every time it happens. And before you say it, I know I'm not accidentally sitting on the remote and changing it, because sometimes it switches when I'm in a completely different room. Last night specifically, I made sure that the remote was left on the end table next to the love seat I usually sit on to watch whatever I'm interested in at the time when I went to go make some mac and cheese in the kitchen. I left the show on as usual so I could hear it while I cooked, since the layout of our apartment allows me to easily see and hear our TV from over the kitchen counter. This was nearly at 3 a.m. in the morning, so Jackson was dead asleep when the TV decided to do its thing again. I almost spilled the boiling water and noodles all over myself when it switched to the channel, since the only thing that ever plays is white noise and static. I let out an embarrassing yelp like a frightened chihuahua when it happened, thanking God that Jackson wasn't awake to hear it. The way he is, he wouldn't be able to drop it for the next year. It lasted for nearly 4 hours this time, and like usual, I couldn't turn the volume down either. I ignored it as best as I could while I made my food, but I swear it sounded like it was getting louder the longer it went. I sat down in the love seat after I was done cooking, eating out of the pot because I don't want to wash any dishes I don't have to, and just kind of watched the static while I waited for it to change back to Netflix. The reason I'm posting this and the reason I'm worried is because by the time it switched back, I had barely noticed any time had passed. But when I checked my phone, it said that 4 hours had effortlessly gone by. I hadn't even touched my food in that time, and it was basically inedible because of how crusty it got. I threw it away, didn't even attempt to eat it, and I didn't really feel hungry either. I should probably just throw the TV out, but I don't exactly have the budget to buy a new one at the moment. It took me a moment to realize as well that I hadn't blinked in the time I was looking at the TV either. My eyes hurt like shit the first time I did. I fully teared up when I did, which I assumed was a bodily response to how damn dry they had gotten. "TV, do that thing again." Jackson yapped at me from the door frame to his room, his head sticking out with that stupid mop of a haircut he had. "Yeah, think it was about 4 hours this time. Surprised you didn't wake up, to be honest. I sleep like a brick, you know that. Plus it hasn't woken me up any of the other times you claimed it happened." "Well, it sounded louder this time, you never know." That was about the entirety of the conversation we had that day. I didn't exactly feel like a socialite after wasting 4 hours of my life apparently watching a dead TV screen. I felt like shit, actually. Just not in the ways I'd assume. I wasn't hungry or tired, just a feeling of dread, really. I never thought that dread could be a physical feeling, but the way I felt was like all of my muscles were so tightly wound and just preparing for something bad to happen. I really don't know what to do or why any of this is happening. I've never had a history of depression or severe mental issues of any kind. Some ADHD maybe, but nothing serious. When I walked outside to head to my first class of the day, the clouds outside almost fully blocked out the sun from casting its light down onto me, and the other students making their way to campus. I only live a few blocks away, but the walk felt like a lifetime. Everyone was passing me even though I was walking at my normal speed, like I was going 40 on the highway. I really don't understand it. Everything felt so wrong. I feel better now, of course. I'm writing this around 11 p.m. on my school laptop. I'm gonna try sleeping on the love seat tonight. I'll update you all tomorrow. I made a mistake. I should have just slept in my own bed. I don't get what's going on. I usually don't dream at all, or at least if I do, I never remember them. I just realized now that I didn't brush my teeth or take a shower last night either. I didn't even introduce myself in the previous post. It's currently 6 p.m., and I only woke up an hour ago. I don't know why Jackson didn't wake me up. We both have classes today. The fucking TV was on when I woke up, projecting that same white noise and static at me for about a minute before shutting itself off after I woke up. I don't know how long it was on for, and I can promise to whatever God you believe in that that screen was staring at me somehow. I should have woken up when it turned on. Usually even the slightest noise will shock me awake. Even last week before all this TV shit started, I basically jumped up in the middle of the night when Jackson cooked something in the microwave. I'm already getting off track. I think whatever the TV is doing is messing with my attention somehow. There's this string pulling in the back of my mind telling me that there's so many things I forgot to do, but it won't tell me what any of them are. When I finally got up, I noticed a horrid stench in the air, like horribly rusted iron and molding meat. I found the source when I opened the microwave and some microwave meal Jackson had cooked was inside. Broccoli, cheddar, and beef. Fucking disgusting. I didn't even want to touch it, so I didn't. Left it in the microwave and just sprayed air freshener everywhere. Hopefully Jackson throws it away when he gets back. God, I hate Jackson. The more I think about it, the more I just want to kick him out of the apartment. He left his clothes all over the floor in front of his room, his stupid band t-shirts and cargo pants scattered everywhere. Whatever, the TV turns on again at 11 tonight and I can't miss it again. It finally showed something this time. At least I think so. I swear I saw something moving in the static, or maybe a cluster of the pixels stopped moving for a few seconds. Either way, I know I saw something and it spoke to me this time. I don't think I can do this anymore. I've missed all of my classes this week and people are messaging me and asking how I'm doing. I tried responding to a few of the texts, but the channel showed up on my phone. 77. It has to mean something. I had to watch it for a bit just to make sure nothing else showed up. I think I really fucked up this time. I know it's my fault, but I don't think I can do anything about it. I can't keep listening to everything the channel tells me to do. I don't even know how long it's been, but that smell from the microwave is driving me insane. I can't do anything about it, though. It was my fucking cat. My cat was in the microwave. I didn't even remember I had one until I found it. Why would I think it was a microwave meal? I couldn't manage to clean it up. What the fuck is actually happening? First, my shows are getting interrupted. Then my car fucking dies, and now Jackson is leaving his clothes all over the apartment. I can't do this anymore. I'm kicking him out. The channel reminded me about something today. He told me that I needed to drink something. I hadn't eaten or drank anything in like a week. I don't even know how I forgot, so I just made a quick smoothie to solve both of my problems. Still a bit hungry, though. I woke up again. My head felt like it was splitting open, and it was the absolute middle of the night. I could barely even look at my laptop to type this out. I don't even know how long I was asleep because I don't remember when I fell asleep in the first place. My place is an absolute mess. It had to be something to do with the TV. When I checked it, it was plugged in and supposed to be turned on, but it wasn't. None of the lights would turn on either, so I assumed it was a power outage of some sort. I really did fuck up. And to anyone that's listening this, I'm really sorry. I don't know what that channel did or is doing to me. I threw the TV out of my second-story window, smashed my phone, and I'm going to do the same to my laptop after I'm done writing this. Whatever it is, it lives in anything that can broadcast, and once you see it, it owns you. I don't know everything I've done, I don't think I will, and I definitely don't want to. I refuse to read my previous posts because I don't think I can handle it. If your TV switches channels and you're 100% sure you didn't do it, don't look at it and get rid of it immediately. I'm sorry. I never go down to my basement. Not because it's scary or because I'm lazy, but because I simply don't have a reason to. I live alone in a small house that's way too big for me, and the basement has always just been a storage space. Boxes of old clothes, holiday decorations, junk I don't need but can't bring myself to throw away. It's all down there, untouched for years. At least that's what I thought. It started with little things I could explain away. The basement door would be unlocked when I was sure I'd locked it. A faint creaking sound at night like wood shifting under weight. A weird smell drifting up through the vents. A mix of sweat and something else, something foul. I told myself it was just the house settling or maybe my memory playing tricks on me. I had lived here for 5 years and nothing weird had ever happened before. Why would it start now? Then, one night, I woke up to a sound that I couldn't ignore. Footsteps. Not the soft creaks of an old house shifting. Not the scurrying of mice in the walls. Real, deliberate footsteps. Slow, careful, coming from below me. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I stared at the bedroom door, listening. The footsteps continued for a few seconds, then stopped. Silence. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and crept out of bed. The house was dark, too dark, and the air felt wrong, heavy, like something was watching me. When I reached the basement door, I hesitated. It was closed, just like always. But this time I noticed something I hadn't before. The doorknob was dirty. Greasy fingerprints smeared across the brass as if someone had grabbed it with sweaty, grimy hands. I swallowed hard. I locked this door. I know I did. Taking a deep breath, I slowly turned the knob. It wasn't locked. The door swung open with a groan, revealing the black void of the basement stairs. My phone's flashlight barely cut through the darkness. I didn't want to go down there. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, to pretend I hadn't heard anything. But I had to know. Step by step, I descended. The basement was just as I remembered. Cold, cluttered, the air thick with dust. But something felt off. My skin prickled. The tiny hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Then my light landed on something that shouldn't have been there. A sleeping bag, old, stained, crumpled in the far corner, half hidden behind boxes. Beside it, a pile of empty food wrappers, a few plastic bottles filled with murky liquid. The smell hit me all at once, rotting food, sweat, something worse. Someone had been living down here. Panic surged through me. I spun around, phone light darting across the basement. My breath came in short, sharp gasps. Then, movement, a figure lunged from the shadows. I barely had time to react before I was slammed against the wall. My phone flew from my hand, the flashlight spinning wildly, casting twisted shadows across the room. I couldn't see them clearly, just a hunched shape reeking of filth and sweat, their breath ragged and wet. They didn't speak. They just laughed. A guttural, broken sound like someone choking on their own breath. I fought, kicking, shoving, but they were strong. Fingers wrapped around my throat, squeezing. My vision blurred. Then, light, bright, blinding. My phone had landed face up, its flashlight beaming straight into my attacker's face. For the first time I saw them, gaunt, sunken eyes, greasy, matted hair. A face so thin it barely looked human. Lips pulled back in a grin too wide, teeth yellow and jagged. But the worst part? I knew this face. It was me. Or at least it looked like me. Before my mind could process it, the figure shrieked and scrambled back, scuttling into the darkness like a cockroach. I didn't wait. I ran. Up the stairs, through the door, slamming it shut behind me. I locked it, pushed a chair in front of it. Then I ran to my bedroom, grabbed my keys and phone, and bolted out of the house. I called the police from my car, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. When they arrived, they found nothing. No sleeping bag, no food wrappers, no bottles, no one. But the basement smelled. The cops noticed it too. That awful, rotting stench. They searched the whole house. Nothing was stolen, no signs of forced entry. They told me it was probably a squatter, that maybe I had interrupted them and they fled through some hidden exit. But I know what I saw. I know who I saw. I haven't been back to the house since. I don't think I ever will, because somewhere in the darkness of that basement, something is still down there, and it looks just like me. I'm not trying to sound like a preachy weirdo like the ones you see on the street corners, but I have seen it. Now, before all of you jump into the comments of this post I'm making, this is my own experience. And even as I speak now, I'm not even sure if I believe it myself, but now I'm just freaking out. And maybe it was an awakening. I sent this to you, my friend, to post it. I've only been alive for about 9 days. That being said, I was an atheist living the most debaucherous lifestyle. You see, I have a DHD, and so I always felt inclined toward partying and drugs, alcohol, anything to get a quick dopamine hit, all that jazz. Honestly, this is a really bad excuse, but I have other reasons to hate religion, thank God he told me that a lot of them are wrong, a lot of them. I have a bad history with women. I would date, even married 3 of them, but I never felt like I could love anyone, so I'd leave them once I got bored. I know now that that was a terrible way to handle relationships, and as of now, I'm going to marry the first woman I actually have a good connection with and never play with hearts ever again. That is, if I ever get that chance. My current situation is not going to result in me being in a relationship anytime soon. Not after what I did. Not after what I saw. How did it all start? It's somewhat of a blur even now when I try to reflect on the moments right before the crash. That's right. This whole nightmare that I experienced, this absolute life-changing knowledge, was all because of a car crash that I died in. I was driving along, drunk driving. God, just writing all of this down now makes me feel a little self-aware about what kind of terrible person I was. All I want now is to beg for forgiveness from everyone that I've ever wronged. Anyway, I was driving, and everything just kept spinning as I thought I could hit the pedal to the metal even harder, trying to impress my friends. I won't tell you their names because I should at least show them that respect. But one of them kept telling me that we could go faster. I kept laughing as we kept speeding along. But then everything changed in a moment. There was a guardrail at the end of the road where it turned, and I was unfamiliar with this particular street. I had no time to react. 1 second I was gripping the wheel, the vibrations of the engine rattling my bones, my drunk mind drenched in overconfidence, and the next, I was airborne. The guardrail didn't stop me. It barely even slowed me down. The car lifted, weightless, like a bullet freed from its casing. I felt the sickening lurch of gravity abandoning me, the world outside the windshield tilting unnaturally. My stomach knotted as my vision blurred from the alcohol and sheer velocity. Then came the impact. Metal screamed. My body lurched forward as if I'd been yanked by some invisible force. the seatbelt biting into my collarbone so hard I felt something snap. Maybe a rib, maybe worse. The airbag detonated, slamming into my face with the force of a sledgehammer, momentarily obliterating everything in a white, suffocating cloud. The car rolled. Glass shattered around me in a whirlwind of jagged teeth. My left arm, flailing helplessly, caught a shard that ripped through my sleeve and into my flesh like a hot knife. Blood spattered the dashboard. I think I screamed. The world was a blender. The inside of the car, a crumpling, writhing metal coffin as it tumbled down the embankment. My head cracked against the side window once, twice, before the glass gave way. My face slashed with 1,000 tiny razors. The taste of copper flooded my mouth. I didn't know if it was from my nose, my gums, or my tongue. Maybe all of them. And then, silence. Not immediate. At first there was ringing. A horrible, high-pitched wail filling my skull, drowning out the wet gurgle of my own ragged breathing. The car had stopped. I was upside down. My body hung from the seatbelt, the weight of my own torso pressing against the restraint. Pain. So much pain. My chest heaved, but the air wasn't coming in right. My ribs burned with each shallow breath. I turned my head, slow, agonizing. Through the shattered windshield, I saw the world outside. A mess of twisted trees, dirt, and the hazy red glow of my taillights flickering weakly in the darkness. I should have been dead. I think part of me knew I was dead, because in the midst of all of it, the blood, the agony, the nausea creeping up my throat, I felt something else, something watching me. Just beyond the mangled wreckage, in the shifting shadows between the trees, there was movement. Silent, subtle. Wrong. I tried to focus, but my vision swam, my eyelids fluttering as consciousness threatened to slip away. My body screamed at me to stay awake, but something else, something deeper, whispered that it didn't matter. That I wasn't alone in that car. That I wasn't in my body anymore. And then, just as the darkness closed in, I saw them. The eyes, wide, empty, reflecting the dim glow of the dying headlights. And in that moment I knew. I was about to learn something no living person should ever know. A sudden shock overtook me, pulling me out of the darkness I had momentarily found myself in. I looked around and saw that I was somewhere else. But I started to think about the obvious. Is this the afterlife? I wasn't fully convinced, seeing as I didn't believe in that malarkey. Turns out I was correct, but that didn't really mean I was truly correct. I was breathing. I had a heartbeat. I looked around, confused, wondering what this place was. I walked through a grassy field, looking up at the stars that hung above like majestic chandelier lights. Honestly, it was nighttime, and yet I felt as if there was still the warmth of a star bathing me in its glow. And yet, it just didn't feel quite like the real world. The grass was like walking on silk. I was naked. My body felt as fresh as a newborn child. My senses overloaded with the intake of everything around me. I couldn't see where my friends were. I wondered why I was all by myself if this was indeed the afterlife. But then, I felt something being carried in the wind. A voice. Are you ready for judgment? It was deep, commanding, and yet somehow there was a trace of compassion within it. I instantly spun around. I was half expecting to see either an angel or God himself, but I never in my wildest dreams expected him to look the way he did. A lot of you might think that when you see God, you'd expect something radiant. A golden light, perhaps, or maybe a massive, incomprehensible entity of wisdom and eternal ancient existence. That last part is true. But the being that stood above me, quite a few feet above me I might add, was not the kind of God that would make you feel at peace. He stood like a monolith, his entire head a wound in the sky, vast and unblinking, a thing beyond time, beyond mercy. His robes, if they were robes, were blacker than night, shifting like oil on water, swallowing light and sound and all sense of reason. And his face, or where a face should have been, was a starburst of jagged, spiked radiance, a coronet of something sharp and holy, something that hurt to look at. This was not a God of fire and hymn, not a God of cradle-side prayers. This was the God of absence, the God of silence after a name is spoken. And still he watched. What are you? I froze. You should know who I am, he said. I deemed your existence, and now that I have you and the ones you were with here at the end of temporary existence, your time for permanence is to be judged. Huh? Your name is Michael, is that correct? Yes. You have been alive for 24 years on Earth, specifically Earth 8,592,042. Wait, how many Earths are there? Did you just say there are other Earths? But of course, there are an infinite number of Earths, and I have a name for every single one of them in every single universe that I have ever created. And I have created all of them, all multiverses, all verses of reality beyond time, beyond the limits of even the most intelligent of beings. I wield them all in the palm of my hand and decide what sort of ending each one shall have. I was flabbergasted, utterly taken down to the point where I wanted to curl up into a ball and cry. So, is this like the afterlife or something? Is this heaven? No. He said that last part like I had insulted him for even suggesting that this place might be heaven. Purgatory? Hell? None of those places exist, my prodigal child. Why would I desire to punish someone with an eternal punishment for a singular bad life? What kind of concept of love do you take me for? I am justice, but I am filled with mercy for all those who are repentant. I rolled my eyes, having heard all of that in Sunday school. Well, there's a lot of religions that are getting you completely wrong. Most do. Surprisingly, I wouldn't have expected myself to have such a conversation with the Almighty. And then I asked the million-dollar question, why do you look like something that makes me feel like I'm going to fall into an abyss? He stood there and didn't say a single word. Instead, he answered with a different statement. How I appear to you has everything to do with you. How so? I have seen you as you grew up. I know the mental issues you suffered. I saw how you struggled with that priest who took everything from you when you were younger. Fear not, he died and has been dealt with, but you went off in a different direction. And while it is regrettable and truly heartbreaking that I had to watch you be abused, we must take into account your life choices. I gave another eye roll. I still have to be judged just because I was angry at you? Because I blamed your organizations and your institutions for ruining my life? We all have to carry our own weight. Every human, and species beyond that, must decide for themselves how they will live. All I ask is for them to love each other as I loved you. But I cannot ignore your self-indulgence, your complete disrespect for the lives of other people. Your friends are dead now, and I'm afraid I will have to send you where I have sent them. I swallowed. He already said that there wasn't an eternal pit of fire, yet somehow I did not feel like where I was going was meant to be a good place either way. I probably should have shown more reverence, but I've always had a bit of a chip on my shoulder. I scoffed. So that's it? I live my life, I do what I want, and now suddenly I'm some irredeemable monster? Come on, I wasn't that bad. Yeah, I drank, I partied, I wasn't loyal to the girls I dated. So what? Everyone does that. We're animals, right? Just meat sacks with impulses. You made us this way, didn't you? God did not respond. I kept going, my arrogance pushing past the fear bubbling under my skin. I didn't kill anyone, I didn't torture anyone. Yeah, maybe I used people, maybe I was selfish, but I never claimed to be a saint. And besides, you let all this happen. You let priests ruin kids' lives. You let murderers walk free. You let me be the way I was. And now you want to act like I should have done better. Still, he said nothing. I threw up my arms. You know what? Maybe you should be judging yourself. What kind of merciful being lets the world go to rot while sitting on some throne beyond time? You could have told me the rules. You could have shown yourself instead of leaving us all to guess what's right and what's wrong. His silence wasn't out of ignorance. It was the silence of a parent watching a child throw a tantrum, waiting for the inevitable moment when the screaming stops and the reality sinks in. And then, without moving, without sound, I understood. Why do you look like this? I whispered, the anger draining from my voice. And then, he spoke. Because this is how you always saw me. I shouldn't have to tell you to just be a good person and treat people with respect. The moment he said it, my mind reeled. Every argument I had ever made against him, every time I scoffed at religion, every time I had cursed his name, it all flashed before my eyes. I had imagined him as something cruel, distant, terrifying, a thing beyond reason, a cosmic force indifferent to suffering, and so that was what he became to me. Your perception is your judgment, Michael. You lived your life convinced that I was a void, so now a void is all I can be for you. Before I could react, I felt my feet leave the ground. Some unseen force pulled me upward, higher, closer to that gaping wound where his face should have been. My limbs flailed, but there was no resisting it. The air around me turned to ice, my breath stolen from my lungs as the gravity of his form swallowed me whole. Then I fell. It wasn't like crashing through the air, screaming as the earth rushes to meet you. No, this was worse. This was plummeting without end, without direction. My body contorted as I spiraled into the abyss beyond his form. And then the pain began. My flesh peeled from my bones, decaying in an instant. My skin blackened, rotting as it sloughed off in wet chunks. My arms twisted, bones snapping, reforming into something grotesque. But I was still there. I was still in it. I felt every nerve burn, every muscle collapse, every sinew unravel. And yet I did not die. I did not die. When I hit the ground, if it could even be called a ground, I landed in a sea of bodies. They writhed, decayed and broken, a mass of rotting people all screaming in agony. Some had no faces. Some had too many. Limbs jutted out at impossible angles, flesh sloughing off in viscous drips. The air reeked of decay and sulfur, choking the senses, making it impossible to think. Above us, stretching forever, was the sky, if it could even be called that. It churned, a shifting void of darkness and something worse. And ahead of all of us, as we were being forced forward by new people being brought in, the pit. A vast blazing maw that dominated the end, a fire not of warmth but of erasure. It was not a place of suffering, it was a place of ending. A place where existence itself was snuffed out, where the self was atomized, erased, forgotten. And we were all heading toward it, pushed without the ability to turn back, slowly, agonizingly. It would take years to reach, years of pain, rot, and horror before the final release. A hand clutched at my arm, the fingers like gnarled roots. I turned and my stomach dropped. It was them, my friends, or what was left of them. Their hollow eyes burned with hatred, their mouths twisted in misery. "This is your fault, Michael," one of them rasped, their voice like tearing paper. "You brought us here. You killed us." I opened my mouth to respond, but there was nothing I could say. Because they were right. The pain never stopped. It evolved. At first it was the raw, visceral agony of having my flesh slough off my bones, of muscles twisting into knots only to unravel into a weeping rot. Every nerve in my body screamed in ways I didn't know were possible. It wasn't just pain, it was sensation beyond pain. Something deeper, something so profoundly wrong that my mind could barely comprehend it. Then came the next stage. The bones. My skeleton had never felt pain before. Not really. But now, as I shuffled forward with the rest, the marrow in my bones felt like it was boiling. I felt them splinter inside me, shards shifting, grinding, scraping against each other like shattered glass. My spine twisted, then cracked, bending me forward into a shape that wasn't human anymore. And the worst part? I could not die. I could not go numb. The agony remained fresh, renewed with every step. New ways of suffering created with every passing second. The smell of burning flesh and sulfur was everywhere, thick, choking. It filled my decayed lungs, making it impossible to breathe properly. Not that breath mattered anymore. We were walking toward the source, toward that blazing maw that would end us completely. The closer we got, the hotter it became. My rotting skin bubbled, my exposed bones cracked. The air peeled away the idea of existence itself. But even worse than the pain was them. "This is your fault. You killed us. You selfish, arrogant piece of crap." Their voices, their hatred surrounded me. My friends, the ones who had died with me, the ones who had been ripped out of life because of my stupidity, my recklessness, my need to be above it all. They were with me in this suffering, and they despised me for it. One of them, his face almost melted away, grabbed me by the throat with fingers like brittle twigs, snapping yet somehow still holding on. His eyes were gone, empty sockets filled with something worse than darkness. "Why?" His voice was a guttural rasp, wet and raw. "Why did you do this to us?" I struggled against his grip. It wasn't my fault. I didn't force you to get in the car. You chose to ride with me." Another hand clawed at me, another friend, her jaw unhinged, her mouth an empty, gaping hole. "We were drunk. We trusted you. You could have stopped." Another voice. "You laughed when you hit the gas. You knew it was stupid." The crowd of corpses that once were my friends descended on me. They tore at my flesh, even though there was barely anything left. Their nails, jagged and split, raked across my exposed bones. My ribs caved, my fingers snapped backward as I tried to push them off. I screamed, but no one cared. No one could care. Not here. And suddenly it hit me. They weren't here because of me. They were here because of them. just like I was here because of me. We all made our own choices, I choked out, struggling to speak through the suffering. I was responsible for getting them killed, but not for how they lived, just like I'm accountable for how I lived. They stopped clawing at me. For a moment there was silence. Then laughter. Broken. Bitter. "And now we pay for it," one of them whispered. The shuffle continued. The crowd pressed forward, marching toward annihilation. Toward the lake of fire and sulfur. I felt it now. The heat. The impossible, unbearable heat. Even from this distance, it melted what little was left of my flesh. The ground beneath us turned to something viscous, black and bubbling. Swallowing our feet with each step, pulling us down. I turned my gaze upward, toward the void above, toward the God that had condemned me. "Please," I croaked. My throat was dry, raw, shredded. "Please give me another chance." There was no response. I fell to my knees. I was wrong. I was so wrong. The crowd was pushed forward, past me, around me, uncaring. I did see a few others who prayed. I was arrogant. I thought I knew everything. I thought I was above it all. I thought I could do whatever I wanted without consequence. I clenched my hands together, what remained of them, and lowered my head. "I'm sorry." I sobbed, a dry, broken sound. "I don't want to be erased. Please, please." Years passed. Those who prayed and begged quit after many years passed. But I kept begging. I walked forcefully forward like everyone else. I begged. I prayed. For the first time in my entire existence, I prayed. I believed. And still the lake of fire grew closer. I watched as the first wicked ones reached it. They did not burn. They did not scream. They simply disappeared. Snuffed out. Their forms collapsed into dust, atomized in an instant, wiped away from everything. I reached the edge. I saw the nothingness waiting to devour me. I felt my feet leave the ground, felt the final pull into oblivion, and I screamed, "Please, I believe in you, I love you, I trust you. Give me a second chance. I know I was wrong, I know I deserve this, but please, I beg you." Silence. The heat licked at my feet. The moment was here, this was it, and then, "You will get your second chance, Michael." The voice was not cruel, not cold, not indifferent. It was a whisper of mercy. And then, just as I was about to fall into the abyss, I was yanked back. The fire, the darkness, the pain, gone. My eyes snapped open. I was on my back, asphalt beneath me. The air was cold, real, thick in my lungs. I gasped. Lights flashed above me. Sirens, voices. I was in the wreckage of my car. The paramedics were pulling me out. I was alive. I was back. I don't know how to end this, really. There's no perfect way to wrap up something like this, no clever last line that makes it all make sense. I guess I should start with the obvious. I'm in legal trouble. They got me for DUI, reckless endangerment, and involuntary manslaughter. 3 people died because of me. My friends, their families, God, their families. We'll never get them back, and nothing I do can change that. No amount of belief, no amount of faith, no amount of begging God for another chance will bring them back. But he still gave me one. And I'll never understand why. I'm going to prison, probably for a long time. And I accept that. I won't fight it, won't try to argue my way out. It's where I belong. It's the weight I have to carry, and I will carry it. But I won't rot away in a cell. I won't sit there, blaming the world, blaming God, blaming everyone but myself. I was that person once. That person is dead. I believe now. I know that I was given this second chance to do something. To be something. And I know what that is. I'm going to help others in there. I'm going to reach out to them. People like me, people who have made mistakes, people who think they're beyond saving. I'll tell them the truth, whether they believe me or not. Because some of them are on the same path I was, and I know where it leads. I've seen where it leads. I can still feel the heat when I close my eyes. I can still hear the screams. I know some of you listening this won't believe me. You'll call me a liar, a fraud, a man trying to escape his guilt by making up a grand story. That's fine. You don't have to believe me. But I need you to listen to one thing. Because this isn't about me. This is about you. You still have time, you still have a choice, but someday you won't. And when that day comes, you will see what I saw. My sister Amy and I were raised in a tiny seaside town in the north of England, beautiful to the tourist eye, but relentlessly dull to the pair of teenagers who'd traipsed around the arcade and the gray stretch of beach so many times that we could have walked it blind. The sole activity that still mustered any particular excitement for us was what the local youths had dubbed the Ely Cave game, being that it took place in said cavern situated in an elusive cove accessible only by descending a hazardous ledge of cliff face. The sea currents around it were too strong for us to have swum there and back, so climb we did. Loose stones and scarce handholds in the rock meant you had to crawl on your belly, gecko-like, naively hoping that any climber behind you would break a potential fall. There must have been more than a few broken bones amongst the participants from that stage alone, but Amy and I always emerged unscathed, though somewhat out of breath and streaked with mud and sand from the slope. Once a player arrived at Ely Cave, the goal was to uncover a tunnel through the wall which could be unlocked only by following one or more of the game's many nebulous rules. These ranged from a standard rhythm of knocking on the stone to reciting a song aloud, the latter of which had largely fallen out of favor by the time our generation had started to play. No one we knew had ever been successful, but there were young people who'd gone missing across previous decades who were considered by our peers to have won. The rumor of the hidden gateway had begun somewhere, after all. The question was what it all led to, and why those victorious players had never returned. Like the journey to the cave itself, the implications of those historical vanishings failed to dissuade my sister and I from trying to uncover its secrets. At least once a week we'd climb down into the cavern and stand side by side, knocking our fists along the damp walls in the hope of finding some hidden lock or breaking some spell. What the elusive tunnel was and how it had been hidden from sight was little agreed upon amongst the players. Some of our friends thought it was a man-made construction, a war bunker or treasure trove. Others had the idea that it was paranormal, and that it led into the roots of some other world. Then there was the faction that didn't really believe in anything, playing with the indifferent apathy of young people with nothing else to do. Amy and I often pretended to belong to this group, cracking cynical jokes even as we brought our fists to the walls of the cavern, unable to deny our superstitions. We both knew even then that one of us would win the game without comprehending where that knowing had come from, nor which of us it referred to. So we went back and back to Ely Cave until the day Amy won. Our parents were out, I remember, and with school finished for the summer, my sister and I were at liberty to do whatever we wanted. Predictably, we found ourselves tortured by the usual boredom. The arcades were humid and jostling with families and bickering teenagers, the beach listless with rain. Without needing to discuss it, the decision was made to visit the cove and play the Ely Cave game for the second time that week. With much grunting and swearing, we clambered down the muddy verge of cliff, kicking clods of dirt at each other only half by accident. The sea lashed at the sand like a white rope, and the air felt heavy over us as we ducked into the shelter of the cave. It was only as large within as the average classroom, the roof low enough to touch if we jumped and clapped our hands to it. The names of 1,000 children had been carved into the rock on all sides, and there were empty drinks cans and cigarette butts on the ground underfoot left behind by less reverential players. "Scruffs," said Amy, kicking at the litter. She didn't like the idea of those casually engaged in the game stumbling upon the Ely tunnel before us. "So what are we doing this time?" I asked, referring to the system of knocks we'd try on various parts of the walls. "Last time we did 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 1. No point doing it again, is there?" The common belief was that a rhythm of 8 beats was required to open the gateway. What remained unsure was how precisely they should be delivered. "I don't know," said Amy. "I thought maybe we could do 1 to 2, 1 to 2, 1 to 2, 1 to 2, like a heartbeat, and just work our way round in a circle." "We could try 2 different patterns and get more done," I suggested. Amy shook her head. "Last time we did that, I fucked mine up. It proper distracts me when you're not doing the same one as me." I rubbed my hands together, surprised by how cool the cave remained despite the heat beyond its entrance. "Are we doing the song this time?" Amy rolled her eyes. "You can do it. I always feel like a right knobhead." "That's because you are a knobhead." "Fuck off." I grinned. Amy always became snappy when she was nervous, and I could almost see the dark coils of her hair stand on end. "Well, you don't even have to sing it," I pointed out. "You can just say it." "It's a song, though, that's the whole point. If you don't sing, then it won't work, will it?" To be fair, we don't even know if it even does, or if someone just made it up. Might as well throw a dance in and see if that works as well. In a sudden burst of irritation, Amy pushed my shoulder and stalked off to the other side of the cave. "You're doing my head in now. Just do the knocks, all right?" At this, we both became serious and began working our way slowly around the walls. Our phone torches lit up in our free hands as we wrapped our fists from floor to ceiling as far as we could reach. For some time, there was only the sound of our breathing, the crunch of sand under our shoes, and our knuckle bones against the rock. 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, 1-2. I heard Amy begin to sing quietly, half under her breath, her mouth almost touching the stone. Ely Cave, oh black, oh dark, open up the night you are. As juvenile as the lyrics were, she had a strong voice, and had been in the school choir before she got older and embarrassed of it, mainly due to my brotherly torments. That Amy was singing in my presence proved how desperate she was to be that decade's winner, to uncover the doorway that no competitor, to our knowledge, had. I didn't laugh, couldn't when I felt that same urge to succeed. Our voices cracked as we counted out the knocks or uttered the words of that childish rhyme to the walls. Something came over us there in the cave, a crawling apprehension that we hadn't known there before. The fun had ended, and suddenly I was experiencing the same fear I felt running from the bathroom to my bed at night, thinking something would jump out at me from the shade of the stairwell. "Amy," I said, "let's go. We've lost. We can come back next week." She didn't hear me, for though no longer singing, she muttered under her breath and knocked the wall so fiercely that I saw beads of blood left on the stone. "Ames," I said, "stop it, will you?" She turned her head to snap at me, but before she could speak, her right fist fell through the wall ahead of her, not into a pocket in the rock, but into a stretch of darkness I had not perceived there till she touched it. It wasn't a hole, or a door, or a tunnel in any conventional use of the word, but a black matter that ate 6 feet of stone and let in no light, though Amy's phone was directed right at it. Her arm had been taken by it to the elbow, and it seemed that something had hold of her within it, for as she turned to face the void, her entire body pitched forwards, unbalanced. Amy fell with a scream that vanished without echo, as though the black had taken the sound into itself as well. I lunged for her, grabbing at the back of her shirt, but just as my fingers pinched the cotton, I found myself faced with firm rock again, the shred of fabric trapped within it hanging like a growth of moss. My sister's phone had fallen from her pocket, lying smashed at my feet, the battery ejected from its back. I stood still, gripping onto the rag of Amy's t-shirt, staring aghast at the closed door of the wall. Then I began to scream, incoherent yells of horror and grief and rage that my sister had been taken from me, that I had not been allowed to follow. I started to beat my hands against the cavern, struck and struck at the rock until the skin split across the heels of my hands. I begged to be let in, for her to be let out. Tried to remember the pattern of knocks that had allowed Amy to enter the wall, but it did not once yield. For an hour I stood there, taunted by the quiet and the dark, until at last I staggered out of the cave and clawed my way back up the cliff with barely any understanding of what I did. All I saw and heard was Amy, her cry as the darkness took her in, the pain that surely seized her as she fell. Striped with mud and sand, I stumbled home, the shock that closed over me so profound that I barely noticed my parents' car pulling into the driveway behind me. Only when my mother got out to shake me by the shoulder did my gaze focus on their faces, both of them tense with alarm. "Amy," I said, "she's gone, she's fucking gone." Then I screamed again and couldn't stop until my throat gave out and shattered the sound. My parents half dragged me into the kitchen, forcing me to sit at the table even as I struggled against their arms. Having grown up in the town, they'd heard of the Ely Cave game, and had even played it themselves in their youth. But in adulthood, they no longer believed in it. And as in choked pieces I described how Amy had vanished, I saw the anger and bewilderment of that doubt cloud their eyes. I'd later learned that they thought my sister must have fallen from the cliff and broken her neck, or else attempted to swim against a violent current and drowned. They believed that I lied then through the guilt that I'd had some part in her death, or because the sight of it was so unbearable that I'd rather pretend the cave had swallowed her than admit the reality of what I'd seen. The police were called, forcing me through another interview that exhausted me to the point I could no longer form coherent speech. A search was conducted around the cove with the expectation of finding a body or some evidence of an accident, but being that none was discovered, I was interviewed a second time, this time with the implication that I had harmed Amy in some way, or had concealed her having run away from home. In the end, they could find no proof of that either, succeeding in nothing but reducing me to hysterics. My mother and father, though still privately convinced of my guilt, defended me against the rumors that arose from her disappearance. They campaigned endlessly in the news and with posters and radio interviews, offering a reward to anyone that came out with information as to where Amy had gone. Their efforts consumed them to the point that they both lost weight, wandering about the town, flyers in hand, like two lone survivors of famine. In time, they grew distant from me, a gully which later deepened into resentment when I was suspended from school after fighting with another pupil, Sam Rowe, between classes. "Heard your sister won the Ely Cave game," he'd said, shuffling after me down a busy corridor. "How did she do it?" He hadn't been the first to ask, but the others who'd done so quickly backed off when they'd seen the look in my eyes. Sam, however, kept pushing, following me even as I attempted to lose him in the knots of students between us. "You know what, I bet you're full of shit," he scoffed. "Bet you didn't go anywhere near it." "Yeah," I snapped, "so where's my sister then?" Sam shrugged, his greasy face sly with malice. "Probably run off with some lad. Everyone knows what she's like." I'd turned and hit his sneering mouth with the same blind anger with which I'd struck at the cavern, and only our peers yanking us apart prevented me from knocking Sam's teeth down his throat. In the weeks following that incident, barred from the school gates, I entered a daze that never quite ended, drifting between Ely Cave and the house in which I felt unwanted, waiting for Amy's return or some definite sign of her end that I knew was unlikely to come. Sometimes, as I ran my hands across the rough walls of the cavern, I thought I heard my sister's screams or snatches of her voice in song, straining my ears at the dark until I lost the trace of them again. There were days that I convinced myself that there were other voices too, and I would stand and listen to them till nightfall, mesmerized by dread, though perhaps it was only the sea I heard against the rocks, or the gulls wailing overhead. But I never believed that, for the horror of Amy's loss prevented me from perceiving the sound as anything but the cries of the many children that had fallen through the stone. I continued my habitual back and forth from house to cove incessantly, giving it up only when, in my late teens, my mother became ill with a heart condition. My father had fallen into such a profound depression that he couldn't be expected to look after her, and so my life became for them and them alone. I didn't mind it, for by then I'd come to blame myself for Amy's vanishing completely. I should have played without her, I'd tell myself, driven her off with a scathing word or shove. Over time, I'd forgotten how close we were and how pig-headed Amy had been. With or without me, she would have been a competitor in the game, and it was only my bad luck that I'd been present to see her digested by the cave. My mother died when I was 20. My father could barely look at me when we buried her. He passed some months after from a sudden aneurysm, and though I'd been alone since Amy had disappeared, I truly felt it then, trapped in the corpse that was our home. I was resigned to that loneliness, certain that I was deserving of it. The following summer, a knock came at the front door in the night. I lay in bed listening to it without any intention of getting up to answer, my head pulsing from the remains of a hangover. Like my late father, I drank. I rarely received visitors, was unemployed, and had few friends left by then, if any at all. Someone had likely gone to the wrong house, I thought. They'd go away soon and I could sleep. Only when the knocking started on the windows did I stumble down the dark stairway to the front door, fumbling to unlock it and tug it clumsily open. A small girl stared up at me from under a tangle of dripping hair, sand smeared across her face like a half-mask, one skinny arm shielding her eyes from the rain. She couldn't have been more than 16, and yet she held herself delicately as though she were very old or ill. I knew her, she was my sister, but it was so impossible for her to be there, and almost entirely unchanged, that I looked at her as though she were a stranger, my arm across the door to prevent her from entering the house. I was afraid of her, of course, for I did not know what she was. "Are not going to let me in, then?" said Amy, and her voice was the same, though dull and dry. "No," I said. "You're not Amy, you can't be. You're still in Ely Cave, you're dead. I saw it." She shook her head, and her eyes were lifeless, the brown of them gone to black. "It let me go," she said. "The people who won the game before me. They're all in there still." I felt a weakness come over me and gripped onto the door in case I fell. "I don't know what you're on about," I mumbled. "What are you—" "Just let me in and I'll tell you." Not knowing what else to do, I stepped back into the house and Amy followed. She was wearing the same pink t-shirt she'd worn on the day we'd played the Ely Cave game, a chunk ripped from the back where it had been trapped in the wall. I'd gone insane with grief, I thought, or the drink had summoned a ghost. But as Amy moved past me into the kitchen, her arm brushed mine and it was warm, the heat of the living. I was glad to sit down, so lightheaded with shock that I was surprised to still be on my feet. Amy looked at me and I looked back. Neither of us spoke for some time. Then I said, "So what is that thing in Ely Cave?" "The hole you fell into?" "Alive," she said simply. I let out a hysterical laugh. "How can a cave be alive?" "Because it just looks like one, but it's not. I think it's a monster. Some of the players inside it called it that. And the game we've all been playing, it's all pointless. It doesn't even matter, it just chooses people to let in when it feels like it." I studied Amy's face, which was serious in a way she'd never been as a child except inside Ely Cave. "So how do you know it chooses people?" I asked. "Because it told us," said Amy. "We could all hear its voice in our heads. Like if darkness had a sound, I swear that's what it was like, the Ely." I rubbed my face, finding it damp with a sudden sweat. "When it took me inside it, I could hear other kids screaming and shouting," said Amy. "Felt them all round me, pushing and shoving and all desperate to get out. But nobody had ever got out before. They only ever went in and just stayed there. Never got any older, like it was preserving us or something. Not that we could see each other to tell. Like I said, it was all black, so black and dark and cold as well." My sister leant her head upon her arms, and I wished that I had the courage to get up from my seat and hold her. But I'd never been that kind of brother, and though she'd come back to me, we were still, in a way, far apart. "I was in there years, wasn't I?" said Amy suddenly. "It felt like even longer, ages and ages. All of them other kids that had played the game, thinking it was a fun joke, all of them were just crying and shouting, knowing they were never getting out of the Ely. But I don't think any of them actually knew how long they'd been in the dark." "I used to hear them," I said. "In the cave I heard them all the time. I thought I was making it up." Amy didn't answer, only drew spirals on the table with her finger. A habit she'd had as a girl and had held on to even through all those years in that timeless, sentient hallway. "Do you know what the Ely was keeping you there for?" I asked. "Yeah," said Amy flatly. "It was eating us, not our bodies, the inside of our heads. Them kids were all going senile. You could tell when the Ely was done with someone when they'd just go quiet. They'd forget how to talk and who they were. That was worse than all the screaming because they wouldn't die. They'd just be like that forever in there, and nobody outside would ever know what happened to them. An endless lifetime without light, slowly devoured by a vast concourse of evil." I ran a hand across my clammy forehead as though to brush the thought out. "So how did you get away from the Ely?" I asked. "How are you even here?" Amy glanced up at me and her eyes were like grave dirt, full of a death that never was. "It let me go. It knew you'd seen it take me, so it kept me for as long as it did, knowing you were on the other side, waiting, thinking you'd lost me. Then one day I saw light coming into the Ely. I was the only one of the kids there that could. I went towards it, walked and walked through the black until I was in the cave again. I thought it was a trick at first. I was too scared to go anywhere. But then it got dark again. A real night for the first time in so long. I climbed up the cliff and walked all the way here, but the whole time I knew the only reason I was out of the dark was because it wanted you to see me." "Why, though?" I pressed her. "Why would it do that?" "So I could tell you what was at the end of the game," she said. "What it was doing in there. So it could laugh at you. It knows that no one's going to believe you, Jake." She laid her head on her arms again, and looking at her I wondered how much of her mind had been consumed during her 11 years in the dark. How much was left of her perhaps even she did not know. "Kids are still going to play the Ely Cave game," said Amy. "They'll play no matter what you say or what you do." I wasn't always a man of faith. I wasn't always the kind of person you'd look at and think, "There's a man who's found peace." The truth is, I didn't deserve peace. I didn't deserve redemption. I had done things in my past. Horrible things. Things that I've never spoken of, never confessed to anyone. I thought if I buried them deep enough, I could escape. I could forget. But God doesn't let you forget. He doesn't let you hide. That's how I found myself in the small town of Westbrook, working under Pastor David. He was the kind of man everyone trusted, the kind of man who made you believe in something good, something pure. I thought if I worked alongside him, if I stayed close, maybe, just maybe, I could bury the person I had been. I could push the darkness far enough away that it would never catch up. At first, it was exactly what I wanted. The work was simple. Helping around the church, managing the community programs, running errands. I stayed in the background, never drawing attention to myself. Pastor David never pried into my past. I told myself that he had no reason to. But one night, everything changed. It started as a normal evening. Pastor David and I were about to head to bed after a long day of helping with the church service when the phone rang. The call came from a woman, frantic, almost breathless. Her daughter, Emily, was acting strange. They believed she was possessed. I didn't know what to think. Possession wasn't something I had ever experienced, but Pastor David was a seasoned man of God. He had dealt with demons before, or so I had heard. I was young and naive, and I thought maybe this was a chance for me to truly see faith in action. I could watch Pastor David perform an exorcism. I could finally see what it meant to confront the darkness that had always threatened to consume me. Pastor David wasted no time. He told me to grab my coat and we were out the door. The house we arrived at was old, ancient even. It creaked in the wind and the lights flickered like a bad omen. I felt the weight of the place before we even stepped inside. Something was wrong. You could feel it in your bones. Emily's mother led us upstairs, her face pale, her eyes wide with panic. She didn't need to say much. Her expression told the whole story. Something had happened to her daughter. She didn't know how to help her, but Pastor David seemed calm, collected. He knew what he was doing. When we entered Emily's room, I froze. She was sitting in the center of the bed, her body twisted unnaturally. Her limbs were bent in impossible angles, and her skin looked stretched too tight over her bones. Her hair hung in matted tangles around her face, but her eyes, those eyes, were the worst part. They were entirely white. There was no iris, no pupil, just empty, endless void staring back at me. Emily's head jerked up when we entered, but it wasn't the normal motion of a person. It was unnatural, wrong. Her body seemed to follow her head like a puppet on strings, her limbs jerking as though they weren't quite connected to her. And then she spoke. "I've been waiting," Emily whispered, but her voice wasn't hers. It was deeper, like a growl, a guttural sound that didn't belong in her small frame. It was the voice of something else, something ancient. Pastor David stepped forward, his voice strong and sure, as he began to read from his Bible. "In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, I command you to leave this child." But Emily didn't seem to react. Instead, her head tilted to the side, and I felt a cold chill sweep through the room. It wasn't just the cold of the night air outside. It was something much worse, something hungry. Then she smiled. The smile was wide, too wide. Her lips stretched back, revealing teeth that were far too sharp. Too many teeth. The grin was almost mocking. And then her eyes found me. "Matthew?" Emily hissed. My name hung in the air like a curse. How did she know my name? I had never told anyone here about my past. I had never mentioned it to Pastor David. It wasn't something I was proud of. It was the kind of thing you bury and never speak of again. But Emily, or whatever was inside her, knew. "Matthew," she said again, the words dripping with malice. "You've been hiding, haven't you? Hiding from what you did. But I can see it, I can see everything." I felt the blood drain from my face. My breath caught in my throat. She couldn't know. No one knew about the alley. No one knew about the man I had hurt, the one I left to die. The memories came flooding back in a wave of terror. I could see the flickering light of the street lamp, the way the man had stumbled toward me, his pleading eyes, the way I had. "No," I whispered, barely able to form the word. "You're lying, you're lying." But Emily only laughed. The sound was wrong, distorted. It echoed in my ears. "You can't hide, Matthew," she said. "I've seen it all. I saw you. I saw the blood. I saw the fear in his eyes as you—" I couldn't breathe. I wanted to run, to scream, but I couldn't. I was paralyzed. And then she turned her gaze to Pastor David. I don't know why, but something inside me told me that it wasn't over, that it wasn't just about me. There was more to this. I didn't know what was going on, but I could feel the walls closing in. Emily's voice softened as though she were savoring the moment. "But you, David, you're the real monster here." Pastor David's face drained of color. His lips trembled. He dropped the Bible to the floor. I had never seen him so vulnerable, so broken. "You've been hiding too, haven't you?" Emily's smile stretched wider. "I know your secrets. I know what you've done." The room grew colder. My teeth began to chatter and my heart pounded in my chest. I looked at Pastor David, but I could see the fear in his eyes. For the first time, I saw the man who wasn't the perfect, unshakable pastor everyone thought he was. He was just a man. "I never meant to," Pastor David stuttered, but the words wouldn't come. "I know," Emily purred. "I know everything. You remember the boy, don't you? The one who came to you begging for help. But you didn't help him, did you? You turned him away." David's face twisted in agony. "No!" he shouted, his voice trembling. "I never wanted—" "But you did," Emily interrupted, her voice cutting through the air like a knife. "You turned your back on him. You promised you would help, but you didn't. And the woman, the one who came to you in the middle of the night, she begged you for mercy and you refused her. You let her die." David fell to his knees, his face a mask of horror. "I was trying to help," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I didn't know what else to do." But Emily wasn't listening anymore. She was gone. The room was silent. Now let me tell you about the cases Emily was speaking of. There was the boy, Tommy. He was just 14, his face a mess of bruises and cuts. He came to Pastor David's church one Sunday, desperate, trembling. He was running from something. His father, his stepmother, he wouldn't say. But he asked for help. Pastor David told him to come back the next day, that he'd pray for him. When Tommy returned the next day, the church was empty. Pastor David was nowhere to be found. Tommy vanished after that. The second was the woman, Angela. She came one night, tears staining her face as she begged for shelter, for anything. She had been beaten by her partner, and Pastor David was the only person she trusted. But he turned her away. She ended up dead in the woods a week later. No one ever found out why she left, but there were whispers. Whispers that Pastor David could have stopped it. The police arrived a week later. They had been investigating Pastor David for months. They'd heard rumors, seen the strange disappearances, and had finally put the pieces together. But there was something more. Emily hadn't been possessed. She'd been part of a sting operation to get David to confess. They had her trained, telling her everything she needed to know about David's past. And when they finally broke him down, he admitted it all. I wasn't the only one living in a lie. The police had been watching us all along. A few days later, after Pastor David's arrest, something strange happened. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of footsteps. Someone was in the house. I got out of bed, my heart pounding, and I slowly crept toward the door. When I opened it, Emily was standing there in the hallway, her eyes still white, her smile still twisted. "We never leave, Matthew," she whispered. "We never forget. And now, I'm not sure who is haunting who. The past never truly leaves you. It stays with you, festers inside, and no matter how hard you try to escape, it always catches up. The worst part? I don't think I'm ever going to be free of it. Because I think the devil's coming for me again." Hi there. If you're listening this, I really could use your help. As you've probably gathered from the header, I'm stuck in a parking structure like the ones you find at a mall or a college. I know it sounds strange, they have exit signs and they're not exactly complicated structures, but this is different. It's difficult to tell how much time has passed, but my phone says it's February 2nd. That means I've been in here for almost 3 days now. 3 days ago on the 30th, I had a very important interview. I work for a fairly prestigious tech company, and the position I'm going for would almost triple my salary. Not surprisingly, I was incredibly nervous and anxious about it. I'm great at my job, but I'm terrible at speaking. This wouldn't be the first interview I've blown just by coming off as weird or awkward. For weeks, ever since I found out about this opportunity, it took up all the space in my mind. I started having nightmares about it, which created a sort of self-perpetuating loop. I worried the interview would go poorly, which stopped me from sleeping well, which made my performance at work worse, which made me worry more about the interview. It got pretty bad, honestly. But the night before the interview, the night of the 29th, I didn't have a nightmare. I mean, I thought it was a nightmare at first. It looked just like the other nightmares I had been having. But it was different. In the dream, I was in an ornate office, one that clearly belonged to someone important. I was sitting in a comfortable chair in front of an intimidating desk made of dark polished wood. At the desk sat a middle-aged man with a wide grin. He looked just like any business professional you would imagine, save the air of hunger laced in both his gaze and his smile. I could see out the window of the room, but there was nothing outside. Not as in there was nothing interesting or it was mundane. I mean, outside of the room was nothing, just darkness. You see, I had similar dreams before. Normally at this point, the man, who I knew to be someone important in my dream, would tell me I'm fired or I didn't get the job. Something along those lines. But for a long time, he just looked at me. I felt words form in my throat, nervous, rambling explanations of why he should hire me, but he cut me off before they left my mouth. Do you want to succeed? His voice was odd. It shifted pitches and tones seemingly at random. It sounded like every word he spoke was an impression of a different person. His mouth was strange, too. It moved far more than it should have. When it opened to speak, his jaw moved too far. His lips were too animated. Still, I couldn't handle the anxiety I'd been experiencing anymore, so I told him the truth. Yes. His grin grew wider and his pupils narrowed into thin slits. He spoke again. Are you willing to be tested? I had no idea what he meant, but like I said, I'm great at my job. I knew I could handle whatever test he had for me, so again I said, yes, I am. Without another word, he extended a hand out to me, which I then shook, my arm moving without me willing it to. As soon as I did, I woke up in my bed at 6 a.m. I felt great, like I had slept for a full 8 hours, when in reality I hadn't gone to bed until around 3 a.m. My morning routine went as smoothly as usual. I showered, got dressed, ate breakfast, and got in my car to drive to the interview. It was uncharacteristic of me, but the anxiety from the weeks prior had evaporated, leaving me with a sense of confidence and excitement. I could do this. I knew it for a fact. There was no traffic that morning, and I got to my interview early. I pulled into the 4-story parking structure and grabbed a spot right by the entrance. I practically skipped to the waiting area outside of the office, and they called me in almost immediately. The interview went amazing. I spoke with a confidence I've never had before. I had an answer for every question, and I could tell I was impressing my interviewer. It did feel a bit weird when I spoke. My mouth moved in a way that wasn't entirely familiar to me. But it hasn't happened since, so I'm not terribly worried. At least not about that. I'm happy to say I got the job on the spot. I'm actually meant to start tomorrow on the 3rd. So if anyone has any ideas on how to help me with the problem I'm about to describe, please let me know quickly. As soon as I shook my new boss's hand, a chill ran through me. My confidence left me and I could feel my knees buckling like they usually do in high-pressure situations. But I didn't let that bother me. If anything, it gave me a feeling of triumph, like I was gloating. I had cheated my nerves, and now it was too late for them to ruin this for me. I was ready to go home and relax for the first time in weeks. I got in my car with a smile on my face and backed out of my parking spot, not yet noticing how dark it had gotten outside. I had parked on the 4th floor. The building connects directly to the parking structure, and this was the nearest spot to where my interview had been. Honestly, it was a small miracle that the spot hadn't been taken earlier. I started my drive, following the exit signs that pointed me left and then down, then left and down again. This kept on for 20 minutes. I stopped the car for a bit to gather myself. My line of thinking was that I had been numb to my nerves earlier, and they were catching up to me now. I figured I would park again and wait for someone to leave the building so I could either ask for directions or just follow them out, but no one came. An hour went by, then 2, then 3. At this point I had had enough, so I got out of my car. Rows and rows of cars lay ahead of me. Behind me were both the ways up and down. The air felt incredibly humid and heavy, almost foggy. There was a sign on the wall labeled, "Floor -12. I stared at it for a while, not sure if this was a joke or if someone had made a mistake. I figured I had been driving down for a while, so I'd walk back up a floor or two just to see if maybe I could find someone. As I did, I could hear scraping coming from somewhere above me. The noise echoed down the concrete halls. I called out nervously, "Hello?" The word bounced off the walls and floors as it ascended the parking complex. The scraping stopped, and the world went dead silent for a singular moment that lasted an eternity. Then, the air was filled with the most bone-chilling scream I had ever heard. Footsteps rang out loudly from above. They were headed towards the ramp leading to the next floor, to me. I don't know who or what that was, but I had no interest in finding out. So I ran to my car and pulled out of the parking spot, nearly flooring the gas pedal as I resumed my descent. In my mirror I saw it, a huge, spindly, pale gray humanoid thing chasing after me with lopsided strides. The best word I can describe it with is crooked. Its limbs twisted and curved like gnarled tree roots. I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that I watched this monster in my rearview mirror pick up a sedan and throw it at my car. Luckily, it missed and the sedan smashed into a support column to my left. I drove as fast as I could without flipping my car on the sharp turns until I felt comfortable enough to slow down. It must have been 50 floors lower than where I started. I followed the signs that still somehow read, "Exit," in glowing red letters, and so down I went, hoping that I would find the exit at some point. I can't turn around not knowing that thing is somewhere back there. And that has been the last 3 days for me, driving deeper and deeper into this never-ending cage. I keep a case of water bottles in my trunk and I have trail mix and beef jerky to last me a while, but I really am starting to panic. I have a charger for my phone that I'm using to type this out. But what happens when I run out of gas? I won't be able to charge my phone, and worse, I'll be stuck outside and moving much slower. I shudder at the idea of that thing catching up to me. Some of you may be asking, why not just get out of the car and go over the side of the parking structure? I already tried that. Just like in my dream, there is nothing outside of this place, only inky blackness. All I can see looking either up or down are endless levels of the same parking structure. I also want to note that until floor -302, the parking spots had all been chock full of other cars. But now I only see one or two occasionally. Things are getting worse, and I'm starting to think I'm not the first person this has happened to. I drove by a dark green Jeep Wrangler the other day with a massive hole through the windshield. Shattered glass and stale blood littered the inside. The door hung open, and a trail of dry blood led away from the car, trailing off towards the edge of the floor, towards the darkness. I can't tell if the non-stop driving is getting to me, or if I'm losing my mind, but I keep seeing things. As I'm driving, I'll occasionally see a figure peeking out from behind a corner or a column in the edge of my vision. But when I turn to look, there's nothing there. I hear noises occasionally, too. Not the scraping usually, but sobbing. I can hear faint sobs echoing through this place, but I can't tell if they're coming from above or below me. Even the air in here acts strangely, changing rapidly from cold to hot. The air conditioning in my car has helped with this, but again, what happens when I run out of gas? So, as you can see, I'm in a bit of a conundrum currently. I'm trying my best to stay optimistic, but it's difficult and I feel like I'm at the end of my rope. My low fuel light came on not long ago and I'm freaking out a little. If you're listening to this, could you please help? The lake near my house is my favorite place to go for some isolated relaxation time. Some days I just lay in the sun, soaking up the hot rays. Other days I'll walk in the shallows, enjoying the crisp water on my skin. The lake floor is a soggy, muddy, seaweed-covered mess. With each step away from shore, the mud squishes between my toes. The once clear brown water awakens with each footstep. Glittering specks explode from the floor, forming a dust storm of lake-bottom muck and algae. The lake floor gives some people the heebie-jibes, but not me. The mystical muck reminds me of my childhood, when I was naive to germs and viruses, back when I simply wanted to interact with nature. The lake-bottom floor had so much to hide. I found some of my most favorite rocks hidden amongst the seaweed where so many feared to venture. Once I even found a fossil. It was a simple shell outline on a small rock. I treasure that little fossil. The muddy bottom does have its treacherous secrets, though. I've accidentally stepped on a large snake while wandering around the lake's depths. Another time I kicked the largest snapping turtle. It felt like I had kicked the side of a building. Luckily, the turtle swam away upon impact instead of choosing to battle it out. A battle I would have surely lost. You do not want to mess with a Canadian snapper. A blue heron sounds above me, pulling me out of my reminiscing. I admire its wingspan and walk mindlessly forward, following the flight path of the shrinking bird. Sharp. It hurts. Instincts kick in and I yank my right foot out of the water, screaming a prolonged fuck. I clench my ankle between my hands and pull my foot upwards to better see the cause of my extreme pain. There is a long, deep cut that travels from my toes to my heel. Layers of my skin have been sliced open, exposing my muscles and veins. I scream, it echoes across the empty lake. Blood spits from my foot as I struggle to maintain my balance. The pain is so sharp. I grit my teeth tightly while trying to put pressure on my wound. I stare around frantically in search of a place to sit to better analyze the cut. Alas, I'm knee-deep in a dirty lake with a huge cut on my foot. I feel my heartbeat pound with panic as the realization that no one else is here to help me in my time of need. Of course, no one else is here. This is my space of solitude where I come to relax. Fuck, this would happen to me. I mutter between sharp pain-fueled inhales. I decide the best course of action is to hop towards shore while keeping my injured foot elevated in my hands. Without a second thought, I take a small, calculated hop towards shore. Immediately, I vomit my salad lunch when my left foot slams down onto another sharp object. The familiar sensation of my flesh being cut wide open floods my brain with despair. I feel something collide hard into the bones of my feet. I fall sideways in pain. Water splashes around me as I sink downwards. My screams of pain are lost in the water submerging me. Air leaves my mouth, forming large bubbles that rush to the surface. My shoulders make an impact with the lake floor. Both my feet are gushing with blood, leaving painted streaks of red in the murky water. As I collide with the bottom of the lake, a series of deep cuts slice deep into my shoulders. Blood floats upwards all around me as fast as it pours from the slices across my shoulders. I roll to the left toward shore desperately. I collide with the muddy floor and push myself to the surface with my hands. Nothing sharp, no new cuts. With haste, I check the lake floor further to my left for any sharp objects. Nothing. I roll again towards the left, being careful as my sliced back inches towards the floor. It is hard not to scream in pain with each movement. I wince and stop briefly to check the muddy bottom for anything sharp before continuing to roll to the left. Towards shore, towards help. Finally, I roll onto shore, landing on my stomach. I can hardly breathe. Every muscle in my back hurts. My feet hurt. The wounds in my body burn with a hot sensation, yet I shiver with cold. With shaky hands, I reach slowly behind my back. I feel for the cuts I know are there. A whimper falls from my trembling lips. I cry in pain. With each shiver, my muscles spasm and blood pumps out of my body. I can feel lake dirt grinding in my wounds with each of my movements. I cry unapologetically and move forward. The sensation of my thick blood pouring from the wounds has me dizzy. So much pain. Survival instincts kick in. I must save myself. My bag is 50 yards away. In my bag is my cell phone. I can call for help. I must reach my bag. It seems so far with my injuries, but it is my only hope. Biting back the pain, I use my knees, chest, and chin to drag my body forward. Each inch I manage to move closer to my bag is agony. Waves of murky lake water splash over my wounds as the sun burns into my back. I spit out grains of sand that I've managed to inhale as I scoot forward across the shore towards my bag. After 10 yards, I lose consciousness. When I wake up, it is nearly nightfall. I stare towards the water for a long time, unable to move. I feel numb. I know my bag is still so far from my reach. I know I've lost a lot of blood. I am prepared for defeat, prepared to die alone on the shore alone. There are no sounds. Even the waves colliding into my failing body have gone silent. Exhaling slowly, I begin to close my eyes, accepting my fate. A strangle ripple echoes beneath the surface of the water, capturing my attention. I watch in horror as the water begins to cyclone downwards, moving rapidly around the silhouette of a man-like creature. The creature climbs to the surface of the water. He is covered in shells, seaweed, and muck. It wields 2 scimitar blades, one in each hand. His face is hidden behind an opaque green blob that resembles an egg sac. Only his black eyes are visible. I swallow hard as it stares at me from the lake with disdain. Fresh blood trickles off the blades of his scimitars into the water surrounding him. The realization that it is my blood coating his blades sends my heart racing. The egg sac clinging to his face blobs up and down with the screech of his laughter. He mocks me as I lay helpless like a fillet fish on the shoreline. Abruptly, he stops laughing and stomps towards me. Somehow the expression on his blob-covered face is frightening without obvious features of the bone structure below. With each stomp forward, his face jiggles. His eyes narrow, his gaze zoned in on me. His large leather-worn boots fall heavily as he steps onto the shore. His boots are covered in layers of muck and zebra mussels. The smell they are emitting is grotesque. I throw up all over his large boots. He kicks the mess back at me, unloading years of disgust all over me. Some of the mess splashes into my fresh wounds, making me yelp in agony. Again, the creature laughs. My vision is blurred from the mess. I stare up at him, begging for mercy as he raises both the scimitars above his head. The blades create an X over top of him. His tattered poet shirt tightens around his biceps as he holds the heavy weapons over top of his enormous frame. Water drips from his soaked clothing as he yells up at the gods before slamming the blades downwards at me. The blades sink into the sand an inch from my gaze. I can see my horrified expression in the steel. I watch with defeat as the creature drops to his knees in front of me. He grabs a fistful of my hair with his algae-coated hand and yanks my head back. His black eyes stare deeply into mine. Despite all my pain, all I can feel is fear. I stare back with wide eyes. A dark drop falls from his eyes onto my bare cheek. Tears, I think to myself. The creature tilts his head with confusion as another dark tear falls from his eyes. These tears are unlike human tears. They don't fall from the corner of the eye. This dark tear falls from the very center of its eye. I can't stop focusing on the peculiarity of this. The tears begin forming faster. Tear after tear of dark liquid pours onto my face from the creature's eyes. The smell is horrible, like the scent of decaying fish on the shoreline. I whimper in agony and the creature stops crying. It is only now that I notice the sack on his face has shrunk substantially. It once was bulbous and full. Now it lay empty across his face. The creature throws me aside and reaches up to his own face. With force, he slowly tears an edge of the egg sac off his face. He pulls slowly, peeling the sac off a few calculated pulls at a time. Strands of gooey skin and muscle string from the egg sac to the creature's face with each tug. A deep groan of pain splutters from the newly exposed mouth of the creature. Layers of his skin peel off with the egg sac showing the fleshed anatomy of a human entity. Dark blood cascades down his jaw to his neck in a flow of putrid pus. For what seems like hours, I watch as the creature removes the egg sac from his face. His dark eyes dim with each tug of flesh from his body. With half the sac removed, the creature tugs a scimitar from the sand and places the blade beneath the sac. He grimaces and slices smoothly through the remainder of the flesh, attaching the sac to his face. The egg sac pulses heavily in his hand like a beating heart in a freshly cracked chest. The creature stares at it with hatred before turning his gaze back to me. I lay on the beach immobilized from my own pain. The black tears covering my face have started to sting like an acid eating at my flesh. I watch in horror as the creature lowers the egg sac to my face. With precision, he lays it across my face. I try to inch away, but my body is too weak. I protest the loudest I can with my frail voice. He ignores me and presses the warm sac flesh to my face. I try to scream, but the sound is muffled by the egg sac. Everything but my eyes is slowly covered by the egg sac. The creature presses down the edges methodically, ensuring the slimy membrane is glued down on my face. With a satisfied look, the creature leans back on his heels and wipes the dark blood off his chin. Already his skin has started to change where the egg sac once resided. It is healing at an alarming rate. Not only healing, it seems to be transforming. It is captivating to watch the creature begin to morph as I lay in the sand struggling to breathe beneath the sac. Even the dark eyes he possesses begin to lighten, shift, mold into the eyes of a much more human figure. If it wasn't for the sensation of thousands of small, sharp teeth biting into my face, I could have watched the creature change for hours. Beneath the egg sac, I could feel little mouths feeding hungrily on the black tears covering my skin. The teeth clamp down on my flesh and hold their grip. I can feel their little tongues lap hungrily at the tears as they merge with my flesh. I panic and try to rip the egg sac off, but before my fingers reach my face, the creatures smack me over the head with the handle of the scimitar. When I wake up, I find myself lying on the beach staring up at a star-filled sky. The pain in my body and face is gone. The cold night air bites at my skin, forming goosebumps all over me. I shiver and reach towards my face in memory of the horrible nightmare that was the creature of the lake. My fingers collide with a gooey surface, slick and smooth. The egg sac pulses against my fingertips, making me scream in horror. The vibration of my scream makes the angry teeth monsters bite down with vigor into my flesh. My eyes widen in pain. I try to tear the egg sac off my face, but the pain is excruciating. I frantically search the dark beach for the creature that attached this thing to my face. I find him. He is wearing my backpack. He looks more like a human now than before. He looks a lot like me. He smiles at me and tips his hat politely. I stand and sprint towards him, but in an instant he has vanished. His two scimitars are stuck in the sandy beach where he once stood. Beneath the blades are two pieces of parchment paper rolled up and tied with ribbon. One ribbon is orange, the other is purple. I sob quietly as I fall to my knees and pull the parchment paper free of the scimitar blade. With haste, I pull at the purple ribbon and unroll the parchment paper. As the words reveal themselves, the orange ribbon parchment paper dissipates into thin air. I begin to sweat with panic, not realizing I had a choice between one parchment or the other. I feel my eyelids grow heavy with tears. A black oily tear pools down my face onto the parchment. I gasp in surprise, realizing now that I now possess the eyes of the creature. I close my eyes tightly, trying to compose myself before opening them to read the words scribbled on the parchment. The curse of Crimson Lake is yours. For the next 100 years you will house the creature, protect the creature, and feed the creature. Those who visit Crimson Lake and utter the words, "Wouldn't it be scary if," are those who offer themselves to be feasted upon. Thank you for your service and your damned soul. My heart pounds beneath my chest as I read the words over and over. My black tears fall faster onto the parchment, rendering the words illegible. I wipe the dark tears off onto my sleeve, only to realize I am now dressed in the creature's poet's shirt. I drop the note and scramble backwards away from the scimitars. I shake my head violently while struggling to peel the egg sac off my face. The little mouths bite down harder, making me shake in agony. In the reflection of the blades, I see myself. The egg sac is large and full on my face, revealing only my dark eyes. My black tears have stained the white poet's shirt. I am wearing muck-covered boots and tattered slacks. I'm horrifying. All individuality I once held has been stripped and replaced with the creature. He is me. I am him. I feel like I may throw up, but a series of little voices come from the egg sac telling me I better not. For some reason, I listen. The voices then encourage me to go into the lake. I listen as if my being is being controlled. The little voices tell me to walk deeper into the lake until I am completely submerged. I oblige. Beneath the weight of the water, the egg sac provides me oxygen to breathe. The little mouths release their deep bites on my face, ever so slightly rewarding me for my servitude. The scimitars are in my fists. I don't remember picking them up. In unison, the thousands of mouths hum a majestic melody that forces me into a sleep-like trance. I lay down on the muck bottom of the lake and stare upwards towards the surface with my dark eyes. The mouths continue to hum, keeping me locked in a sleep-fueled state. I am helpless. My body feels at peace as the little voices hum. I lay in place for months in the muck at the bottom of the lake, slowly being covered by sediment and algae, breathing methodically into the egg sac as the little mouths sing to me in unison. Many visit the lake. Blissfully unaware, I am cursed and lulled into a sleep-like trance beneath their swimming bodies. That is until one fateful day, a lone couple floated above me in large inner tubes. Their limbs hang over the edge of their tubes lazily, their fingers and toes playing with the surface of the water. The woman has beautifully manicured purple nails that sparkle beneath the water when her toes dive beneath the surface. The male is less polished and kicks his feet heavily at the water, making large splashes. The two float for over an hour, flirting with one another as the sun bakes them slowly. I begin to grow bored of their company when the woman says to the man, "Wouldn't it be scary if a shark attacked us?" The little mouths scream in unison against my face. My body begins to contort. It hurts not only me, but the egg sac too. We all scream as my body twists and convulses. I grow gills, a tail, and rows of teeth. My body stretches and grows until I take the form of a giant great white shark. The egg sac clings to my chin and the little voices grunt in one orchestrated tune, "Feast on their flesh." I do as I am told and swim rapidly up to the surface. The woman is who I attack first, biting and tearing at her right leg until it is free from her body. Their screams tug at the human consciousness left in me. But the little mouths tell me to feed more. They are starving. With my many rows of teeth, I spend the next hour devouring the couple, ripping body part after body part from their torsos. When I finish feasting, the only thing left of them is their crimson-colored blood staining the lake. The little mouths begin to hum again, satisfied with their meal. I swim to the bottom of the lake and my body slowly transforms back into my human state, with the egg sac covering my face once again. The little voices thank me for my service and sing me back to my sleep-like trance. I stare up at the stained red lake water and watch and marvel as their blood moves with the waves. My stomach looks like a beer gut, full of the meal I just devoured. I can taste their copper-flavored blood on my tongue. It repulses me. The little mouths tell me to hush and coo me into a sedated state. From what I understand, this is my curse. To lay here until I am freed or the curse ends. The little mouths are my master and I their vessel to control. This is the curse of Crimson Lake. Wouldn't it be scary if... Melvin was bullied relentlessly. At times it felt like the almost comical youth ultraviolence seen in the books of King and Burgess. The older kids would throw rocks at him, yank his hair, drag him around by his unfortunately large ears, and throw him into the mud bank on the edge of the football field. Not too long ago, they set fire to his locker. I never knew who exactly did it, but that was the rumor I heard while waiting in the fire assembly out in the rain. Melvin was an easy target. He was thoroughly overweight, had pasty skin the color of bacon fat, and smelled of something I don't care to mention. His nose looked like an invisible hand was pulling his nostrils firmly upwards, and his hair was a shade of beester with the texture of wet straw. He should be wearing glasses, but they'd only ever last a day, and Medicaid can only go so far. The worst bit was that he didn't have the smarts to make up for it. It wasn't like he was some quiet academic who'll eventually one-up his bullies, not through violence but through success. In class, he was a failure. It wasn't all his fault, though. Our school was pathetically underfunded, and Melvin had no way of getting the extra help he needed. He lived on the other side of the tracks, a caravan park on the edge of town that my mother warned me never to go near. I didn't know much about his home life until it was all over the news. Melvin did have one thing he excelled in, though. When I was younger, around 5 or 6, I was actually good friends with him. That was before it became common law not to be associated with him. Any time I spent with him, he'd shower me in bug facts. Even now, whenever he had a moment of solace at school, he'd spend it crouched in the corner of the yard, digging through the earth with his rusted fork. Any insects he found, he'd store away in a little plastic bag he brought everywhere with him. He would fill that bag with just about any small creature he got his hands on. Then, when it was almost full, he'd seal it and turn its contents into a fine mush with a rock. For the rest of the week, you'd never see him without that bag. That is, until someone inevitably took it from him, and he had to begin the process all over again. Now, nobody liked Melvin. I didn't either. Not that I felt the need to violently show it. If you had told me last year that I'd end up spending my summer hanging out with him, I probably would have spat on you. It started with a little girl's bike. Me and my friends were dicking around in my cul-de-sac when Chet, the anthropomorphic glue that kept our friend group together, decided it would be funny to steal the bicycle of my neighbor's 5-year-old daughter. We egged him on, and he went through with it, and spent the rest of the day riding around on it. By the evening, he'd gotten tired of it and dumped it on the edge of the creek. As soon as I returned home, my mother confronted me about it. Apparently, that little girl spent the entire day bawling her eyes out in the middle of the street. Admittedly, I snitched immediately. Chet ended up being fined an amount he never told us. After it came out that I was the one who grassed, I was persona non grata. Within the week, I knew what it was like to be Melvin. I spent yard time standing on my own, lamenting. Still, I never tried to find a friend in Melvin, thought I wouldn't have to stoop that low. This all carried on until the summer and beyond. By mid-June, social solitary confinement was getting to me. I thought long and hard about extending an olive branch to Melvin, but always decided against it. Eventually, my mind was made up for me. One morning, my mother woke me up around noon and told me that there was a friend waiting for me at the door. I leapt out of bed, hoping it was someone from my old posse, maybe even Chet coming to make up. Instead, I found Melvin awkwardly standing on my front porch. "What do you want?" I launched into an interrogation. "I was wondering if you'd come play with me today," he told me in his low, nasally voice. After a minute of internal debate, I thought, fuck it. I shouted to my mom that I'll be back before dinner and left to spend the day with Melvin. Our first conversation together felt like dialogue from one of those shitty How to Make Friends books. He attempted some polite icebreakers, told a few bad jokes, and offered me a piece of apple-flavored chewing gum. I declined since the packet had a bit of a stain on it. Before long, our interactions began to resemble normal. We made our way down to the creek, chatting and hitting things with sticks. Melvin is an interesting guy once you get to know him. Apparently, he did live in the trailer park, but not in a trailer. His stepdad was the landlord, and they lived in a large house at the head of the grounds. His mother worked long hours at some place or another, and Melvin spent a lot of time home alone. As we were talking and traversing our way over a moss-covered log, Melvin suddenly squealed with delight and pointed at something I couldn't see. He jumped from the felled tree and dropped to his knees, scrounging around in the mud. I crouched next to him and watched in awe as he pulled out the largest, thickest grub I'd ever seen out from under a leaf. "Whoa, man, that's disgusting." "Cool," I yelled. Melvin held the grub uncomfortably close to his lips as he gazed longingly at it. Eventually, he snapped out of the trance and with his free hand rummaged around in a fanny pack. He pulled out a plastic Ziploc bag filled with a rancid paste of crushed invertebrates. He opened it with his teeth and gently placed the grub inside of it. He zipped it up again and stuffed it back inside of his pack. "Why do you do that?" I asked him bluntly. "Do what?" Melvin replied. "You know," I answered, "that thing you always do, with the plastic bags and the insects." Melvin shrugged earnestly, and that was the last we talked on that subject. This became my summer routine. Almost every other day, I'd spend hours hanging out with Melvin, usually down at the creek. I made sure, as best I could, to not be seen by any of my old friends. If it came out that I was spending my time with Melvin, any last hopes I had of clawing back my popularity were done for. On this particular day in July, me and Mel were walking to our usual spot. I peeped over the brow of a small yet steep hill just before he did. I quickly dropped to the ground when I saw Chet and a few others on the other side, making their way towards us. I scurried backwards and pathetically took off running past Melvin and across to the other side of the clearing. Panting, I glanced from behind the tree I was using as my hiding place. I watched Chet and the gang lock eyes with Melvin as she climbed down from the slope. Before he could run like me, they pounced on him. I carried on watching, and they buried his face into the mud, stamping on his hand and pinching his neck. I turned around and walked back home. I didn't see Melvin for a few days after that. When he did finally turn up at my door again, he had a black eye and a swollen lip. I stupidly asked him, "Are you okay?" and left it at that. I didn't bother apologizing. I didn't think there was anything to say sorry for at the time. It was that day he suggested we should hang out at his house. I was reluctant, but seeing the state he was in, I understood his reasoning. Despite my mother's warning, I followed Melvin to the trailer park. It was as run down as I imagined. Bits of scrap metal and old cars were strewn across the front lawns of the caravans. From old wire hung wet clothes that dripped a slow rain onto the already sodden earth underneath. I would have believed you if you told me the place was abandoned. Melvin's house emerged further down the trail. It was an infancy bungalow, although it at least had a fresh lick of paint. Tacked onto the side of it was a small reception. Melvin informed me both of his parents were working. His father owned the source of the low rent, that being the dump next to the trailer park. He admitted that he didn't know where his mother worked, but that she was out all day, most days. The first thing I noticed was the dust. Every surface in his house was covered in a thin skin of dust and cobwebs. The place smelled strange. I honestly couldn't think of a better adjective for it. The wallpaper was completely mismatched, and when I looked more closely at the dozens of pictures hanging up, I realized that each of them seemed to display a different family. I was too preoccupied during the rest of our time together to ask him about it. We had drinks and snacks, of which he seemed to have an endless supply of both. We realized that we both were big fans of the same trading card game, so a few hours of that scorching hot day were spent in his room playing it. He had some pretty rare, expensive cards in his collection, and every time his back was turned, I made sure to pocket one. Melvin's room was a mess. It stank of piss, and the corners were decorated with black mold. Clothes were everywhere, as were roaches. If one ever scuttled in front of him, he'd crush it with his fist and smear the mushed remains against his trouser legs to clean it from his hand. It was around this point I decided that spending the summer on my own wasn't all that bad. After we'd finished up with all the activities he could strain out of my visit, I excused myself to go home. "Wait," he shouted, grabbing my wrist as I walked outside. "What?" I said through gritted teeth as I tried to politely pull myself free from his grasp. "There's something I really wanted to show you," he snorted. "I can't believe I haven't brought my best friend to see it yet," I sighed. "What do you want to show me, Melvin?" "My maggot farm," he said, and began to lead me to it. The heat outside was much more bearable than it had been earlier, but still thoroughly uncomfortable. Melvin ignored the rest of my questions, instead opting to silently drag. We ended up at the far corner of the trailer park. There was a few yards of lame forest cover between the edge of the trailer park and the corrugated iron fencing of his dad's dump yard. A portion of the rusted fence had collapsed, and on top of it was an old white water tank, as well as a myriad of other smaller pieces of trash. The tank was around 4 feet high and 6 feet wide, not including the lid. I stood back and watched Melvin struggle to push the immense metal lid off the top of the tank. I chuckled to myself and looked around. I only now realized how secluded we were. Before I could ask Melvin if he wanted any help, the lid fell back enough to release the foulest smelling odor I've ever known, before or since. It made me physically recoil and gag. I quickly covered my mouth and nose with my baseball cap. "What the actual fuck, Melvin?" I said, muffled by the fabric. "It's my maggot farm," Melvin told me. "I've been working on it for some time now. I collect roadkill a lot. I leave them to fester in this drum, and after a while it becomes filled with maggots. Come have a closer look." I stared in pure shock at Melvin. He looked like a prideful child, finally getting to share his glittery art piece with his parents. When I didn't immediately take a peek at it, he spoke again, more forcefully this time. I said, "Come take a look." Reluctantly, I took 2 steps forward and glanced quickly over the metal rim, intent on getting it over with. For a second, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. I had to look again, longer this time, to make sure. The tank was full of rotting meat. Intestines and bits of fur and bone fragments added an extra texture to the rancid soup. A bizarre yellow, oily liquid pooled around the flesh. Worst of all, it was infested with countless maggots. The tiny white stubs squirmed in their viscous home. Clusters of holes gave way to more and more eggs, ready to hatch a new generation of maggots. Eventually, they'd become flies and start the process all over again. "Melvin, that has got to be the most disgusting thing I've—" Before I could finish, Melvin swung a discarded tire iron into the back of my head. My world turned to nothing and I crumpled to the ground. I woke up an unknowable amount of time later. It could have been hours, more likely a few minutes. It was pitch black. Total, absolute darkness. I took a deep breath in and instantly knew where I was. I tried to stand up, but my head hit the inside of the lid. I slipped in the swirling stew of rot which rose up above my waist and fell. Some of it went in my mouth. I gagged and threw up, adding my vomit to the concoction. The smell was so foul it burned away the hairs in my nostrils. I began to feel the minuscule tearing bites of the maggots. It was like a swarm of gnats. I writhed around, imagining my unseen attacks burrowing into my skin and laying eggs. My head still hurt like hell. It took me a while to realize what had happened. In my state of panic, the first thing I checked were the cards in my back pocket. I figured they'd be ruined now, stained and soaking beyond any recognition. I felt for them, but they weren't there. I started to bang on the steel walls of my prison, screaming and hoping that someone would hear me. No one did. My foot brushed against a firm hunk of meat somewhere on the far side of the tank, and I recoiled, making myself as small as possible, curling up into a fetal ball of fear. I'd never been more afraid in my life. My cousin told me about sniffing glue, and not that long ago I tried it for myself. The gases coming from the rot had a similar effect. I could feel my brain cells dying. Eventually, I was able to form a cognitive thought. That was that I should try to chip away at the patches of rust that lined the inside of the tank. I felt around directly in front of me for something that could be used as a tool. I imagined I'd find a sturdy piece of bone, but I found something far different. It had a metallic center and 2 rigid strips of fabric attached to either side. It was a watch. I held it up and felt around in the darkness for the buttons. I pressed one and all it did was beep. I'm sure that had some effect, but nothing of use. I pressed another one and likewise all it did was beep. The third, however, triggered the small digital display light. In the brief second of vision it caused, I saw that there was someone else in here with me. I froze. My constant state of thrashing, caused by the maggots penetrating my skin, stopped. With a shaking hand, I pressed the LED on again, holding it down this time. Sitting across from me was Melvin. He was naked, or at the very least, didn't have his shirt on. He was watching me with content eyes. He smiled when he knew that I'd seen him. I realized that the piece of meat my foot brushed against minutes before was his leg. I was a mess. I struggled to form basic thoughts, let alone a challenging question. "What the fuck?" was all I managed to spit out. Melvin giggled to himself but said nothing. Instead, he went back to picking maggots out from their bloody nest and stuffing them in his mouth. I began to gag and heave again. There was physically nothing left in me to throw up, so instead my vomit was composed of stomach acid and bile. Once I was finished spilling my guts, I remembered the plan. I shoved the watch into my pocket, not wanting to have to look at Melvin anymore. I felt around in the sludge and almost immediately found what I was looking for. It was a chunk of jagged jawbone from the skull of a deer or large dog. I turned and started to scrape it against a patch of brittle rust. Gradually, I felt layers of oxidized metal flakes peel off. Finally, with a powerful stab, I pushed the bone straight through it. A small olive-sized hole let in the first ray of natural light in what felt like forever. I quickly pressed my mouth against the hole, accidentally breathing in tiny shards of rust as I gasped for fresh air. While I pressed my body against the walls of the drum, I felt something below me. I couldn't reach with my hand, but my shin brushed against yet another patch of rust. It was right at the base, where a bad welding job attached the two main parts of the water tank. With my mouth still clasped around freedom, I kicked violently at the fragmenting barrier. Moving my legs was like trying to run in a vat of molasses. Again and again and again I kicked at it until finally my foot broke through. I was filled with hope and stamped at the loose debris, trying desperately to create an opening large enough for me to squeeze through. The fetid liquid oozed out as the gaping wound in the side of the tank grew wide enough for a 12-year-old to pull himself through. "Hey, hey!" Melvin roared from right behind me. I ignored him and took a deep breath from the smaller of the two holes. I pinched my nose, closed my eyes, and plunged beneath the rotting surface. I left my baseball cap behind me as I felt around for my exit. I grabbed the rim, cutting my hand on the sharp edges. I yanked myself down and finally, out. Like a newborn, my head, covered in filth, erupted from the steel womb. It was followed by my two arms, which grabbed onto the grass in front of me. I began pulling myself out. My forward motion stopped at my waist. I was stuck fast, tearing clumps of grass from the sodden earth as I tried desperately to free myself. Suddenly, I felt someone grab my foot. Melvin was trying to drag me back in. I screamed and planted my hand on either side of the entrance, painfully pushing myself forward. I kicked back, struggling against his vice-like grip. Finally, the sole of my shoe made contact with his jaw. The momentum of the strike propelled me from the drum and sent me tumbling out onto the rot-soaked ground. As soon as I was free, I bolted. I staggered to my feet and ran as fast as my weary body could manage. I plodded through the tangled foliage, narrowly avoiding a discarded washing machine. I didn't look back as I streaked past the trailers, their occupants watching me in confusion and disgust. I cut through the creek, not wanting anyone to see me in this state. I emerged near my house and walked the last few yards, exhausted. This took place in the summer of 1995 and was a pivotal moment in my life. I go to therapy often, not only because of the events of that day, but it does tend to come up in almost every session. My mother was so disturbed by what happened to me, she rang the police. A cop turned up at my house to talk to. He was trying to figure out exactly what had happened. Once I spewed my account and he finished his coffee, he thanked us and turned to leave. Just before he did, he spotted the digital watch in the kitchen bin. It was the one that had been in my pocket since the incident, the one my mother threw away along with my ruined clothes. He turned white when he saw it. He grabbed some tissue paper and wrapped his hand in it, picking up the filth-covered watch which had, to the cop, an oddly familiar gecko pattern on the straps. "Where did you find this?" he said in a low, worrying voice. I told him that I was the watch I mentioned in my account, the one I found in the maggot farm. My parents never told me what happened next. It was to protect me, I suppose. A day later, it was plastered all over the local news that a small business owner and dedicated family man, who I realized was Melvin's dad, had been arrested. Anytime it was mentioned, my mother would quickly turn the channel over. As far as I could remember, I never saw Melvin again. He stopped showing up to school, and the prevailing theory was that he'd been made to live with his aunt the state over. Not that I could talk to any about it, as in Melvin's absence, I became the new punching bag for anyone with a broken home life for the rest of middle school. I'm 42 now and have kids of my own, a boy and a girl aged 6 and 8. I moved away from my hometown long ago, and now live a quaint, happy life. Recently, my brother visited and told me about a Facebook group he recently joined that was dedicated to my old school. Yesterday evening, I sat down with my kids to show them what I had to put up with, and to get a nice dose of nostalgia. The most recent post was about a boy I didn't recognize, but soon remembered was the younger brother of my old friend Simon. A few days ago was the 30th anniversary of his disappearance. The comments were filled with outpourings of sympathy and reminiscing. I looked at the photo and then at my son. As a parent, hearing about these sorts of stories really strikes a nerve. I studied the boy in the picture while my